Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐵 on Wattpad. Now let's start. That's a lot to swallow. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐸 croaked. Uraraka hummed in agreement. Yeah, I mean a dragon quirk just like Ryukyu's. Many people have similar quirks, like Kirishima and that steel guy from 1B. But two people who aren't related to each other having identical quirks is unheard of. Izuku nodded. Yeah, it surprised me too. More or less surprising than having a kid with Ryukyu. Ribbit. Tsuyu jabbed. The boy blushed, looking at the street next to them. I'm proud to say that I'm now smart enough to not respond to that. The girls couldn't help but chuckle. Ryukyu's young justice was now a fair way into their patrol. During this time, Izuku had given the girls his understanding of the Valiant and Ryukyu situation, minus some personal issues, even as uncomfortable as this was for him. While Izuku had gradually gotten better about his frustration towards his other self, there was still a part of him that was a tad bitter. Even with his inner Aizawa chewing him out for being so illogical. Uraraka suddenly spoke. You know, it just occurred to me. Do we have a game plan for what to do if we run into a villain? Things are slightly different now that Deku is here and Ryukyu isn't. 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸 shrugged. I figured we'd just wing it. All the younger heroes, even Froppy, made faces that screamed. Oh god. I just realized 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸's in charge. The blue hero reached into a small bag tied to her waist. If worst comes to worst, though, we have these super nifty villain cuffs. She pulled out a pair of teched-out-looking 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐹FS, causing the agitated students to somewhat relax. Those 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐹FS were specially designed to restrain people with even the toughest quirks. The cuffs were nigh impossible to melt and were even harder to break, even for those with powerful strength-enhancing quirks. They would also taser the wearer if they tried to get them off. Just in case the person had a quirk that would let them simply slip out of the cuffs. 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 smiled. All we gotta do is subdue them and slap these babies on them. The police can then handle the rest. I even brought 5 of them just in case, and just look at us. We can handle a villain or two, right? Izuku scratched the back of his head. I suppose so. It just feels kinda complacent to me, even if there haven't been many villains on Ryukyu's turf lately. 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 patted Izuku repeatedly on the head. Don't worry, newbie. Just follow my orders and everything will be fine. Ryuko suddenly shivered at her desk. Bia. What the hell was that? Probs nothing. Tempest shrugged. The pro shrugged in turn and shifted back to her computer. Izuku tried to reply despite the repeated taps on his head. I will. Please, stop. Padding. 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 stopped. Oops, sorry. Anywho, we should get going. She turned and continued to march down the street. The trio stared after her, with 𝐒𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 placing a finger on her cheek. Sue, no offense to 𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 Midoriya and Izuku nodded vigorously. The unspoken sentiment of, we'd be crazy otherwise, passed through all three of them. I know the odds aren't in our favor, but you'd think we'd find something by now. Ryukyu groaned. I know what you mean. You'd think someone with some level of training and some ability to mitigate a quirk would be out there somewhere. The pair had been sifting through all the rosters online to find a tutor. The number of ads and resumes they have sorted through by now must range in the hundreds. They were basically scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point. There was one actual resume that looked like it was put together by a child. Heart suit name, Sensei. Heart suit iota, Alpha Cent 𝐺𝐶𝐸𝐴. Ryukyu didn't know whether she was baffled or impressed that they even remembered to use full stops. She also really doubted that their name was actually Sensei. Tempest sighed, exhausted and out of humor. Remind me why you aren't teaching her again. Ryukyu grimaced. Because, for one, I'm not qualified. And secondly, I have a full-time job as a hero. Okay, counterpoint. Considering all the teachers at you, like freaking midnight. It can't be too hard for a hero to be a teacher. And it's not like you're out there being a hero all the time, like right now. Only for the moment. In case you forgot, I'm only here because of my mark. Dash, she huffed, pushing herself away from her desk and swiveling to look out her window. I need to keep myself available. It may be peaceful in my area for now, but eventually a major villain will attack. I can't spend that time teaching Eri, not while heroes are going to be more and more stretched thin as time goes on. Tempest grumbled. Yeah, I get it. Teaching Eri and being the prime protector of this town are both full-time jobs. I just feel bad for the kid. She barely gets to spend time with either you or Midoriya. Ryuko hung her head. You don't need to remind me, Tempest. I know I'm failing her. She's barely been allowed outdoors since she came here. Well, why don't we change that? The host flicked a brow. How so? Take the girl outside. Go on an excursion with her and let her have some fun outdoors for a change. Ryuko felt uncomfortable. While I appreciate your sentiment, Tempest, that seems a little reckless. The sarcastic voice dismissed her argument with the same effort one would put into slicing warm butter. Come on, Ryuko. If she isn't safe being covered neck to toe like she is and while you're around, there is no hope for this world. Don't get me wrong, wanting to look out for her is fantastic, but you're being really overprotective. Girl's gotta spread her wings. Ryuko mulled the idea over. I suppose she has gotten better around people. And being outdoors would help her recuperation. The Snarkadile cheered. Exactly. It's not like we're making any progress here anyway. Ryuko nodded with certainty. Alright, let's find Eri. She stood up from her chair with enthusiasm. She's right here. Huh. The heroine mumbled, stunned. Ryuko looked down and saw the little girl just barely out of view due to her desk. Eri jumped up. Surprise, Mama. The mother figure nearly seized up. Oh, hi Eri. Ryuko then screamed internally. Why didn't you say she was there? What if I said something about Midoriya? Tempest giggled. Because this is funny. Also, she was trying so hard to be stealthy, and I didn't want to ruin it. The pro-guardian held her groan. You are going to be the death of me. Ryuko made two realizations at that moment. One, she was clearly still out of it if she didn't notice Eri coming into the room. Two, she may need to consider getting a lobotomy to deal with Tempest. I'm not that bad. Geez. The voice pouted. Mama, is something happening? You looked really happy for a sec. The girl asked excitedly. Ryuko looked back at Eri with a smile. Yes, actually. You see, Eri, I was wondering if you wanted to go out with me for a bit. The girl somehow managed to look even more excited than before. Really? Like outside? Indeed, I figured it's about time you got some fresh air. You mean I figured? The draconic apparition huffed. Ryuko withheld the urge to roll her eyes. Anyway, what do you think, Eri? Would you like to go outside? Yes. Eri yelled as she ran out of the room. Ryuko smiled proudly. Then paused. Wait, Eri. We need to get changed first. Don't just rush outside. She called out, chasing after the girl. I know this is Ryukyu's turf and all, but I'm surprised we haven't seen any villains yet. Izuku pondered. Careful there, De. You'll end up jinxing us. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 chided. He smiled awkwardly. I'm sure that's just a superstition dash. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽, a loud explosion followed by cries for help sounded off in the distance from the hero quartet. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽 turned to look at Izuku, giving a disappointed look, much like a parent would give a child. And this is why you don't mess with jinxes, Deku. She shook her head. But that's just a coincidence. 𝐒𝐮𝐽𝐽 raised her hand to Izuku's face. Not now, De. We have a job to do. She then turned and raced in the direction of the explosion. Come on, D-kun. Uravity called as she followed suit. The last one, there's a tadpole. Froppy croaked. But Izuku hung his head, sighing as he ran after them. Placing blame via jinx was a debate for later. Right now, lives are at stake. Quickly reaching the crime scene, they saw toppled over cars, smashed windows, and small, busted buildings, all amidst a crowd of cowering civilians who still found the time to record the whole event on their phones. People these days really have no sense of self-preservation. At the center of all the chaos was a tall, buzz-cut, muscle-bound man with 2 horns protruding from his forehead. He was clad in a sleeveless denim jacket and dark leather briefs. A shirt was nowhere to be seen on the man. The bull-headed man stomped with each step he made, sowing destruction in his wake as he smashed everything in his path. "Where is Ryukyu? Bring that huge, flying cow out here." The villain bellowed. The 4 heroes who were a distance away remained hidden, sizing up the threat. Well, it's only one guy. Guess we don't need backup, 𝐻𝐸𝐴 whispered. Yeah, and one guy nearly killed Best Jeanist and put All Might in retirement, Froppy stated matter-of-factly. Uravity added. It'd be great if we could find out his quirk. Izuku stood up. Either way, we're the only heroes on the scene. We can't just stand here and watch. We'll call for backup if we need to. 𝐻𝐸𝐴 gave a firm nod. That's the spirit, Deku. I'll bait him out so we can figure out his quirk. Then we'll figure out what to do from there. The subordinates all nodded, hiding their surprise at how good of an idea that actually was. I'm almost not worried, Uraraka thought. 𝐻𝐸𝐴 stepped out and called out to the villain. Hey, bozo, what do you think you're doing? Suddenly, I'm worried again. The gravity girl sighed. The villain turned to face them. And just who the hell are you kids? 𝐻𝐸𝐴 continued to close the gap between her and the villain. Well, I'm 𝐻𝐸𝐴, and over there are Deku, Uravity, and Froppy. We're here to tell you to stop destroying things, or we have to kick your butt and send you to jail. 𝐻𝐸𝐴 paused mid-speech and reflected for a second. Though you've destroyed a lot already. So, you're still going to jail. Guessing us to be you, I guess. The villain took a fighting stance. The hell I am, girly. 𝐻𝐸𝐴 shot herself up into the air, her trademark spiral energy suspending her in place. Butt kicking it is. Izuku turned to his classmates. All right, we'll support 𝐻𝐸𝐴 from the side and wait to see what his quirk is. Uravity nodded. Hopefully, it's not one of those one-shots a person type of quirks. He frowned slightly. Even if it is, that's why we're here. If things look bad, I'll charge the villain. Froppy, you pull 𝐻𝐸𝐴 out of the way. The frog girl nodded. Got it. Uravity put on her game face. Is there anything I need to do? Izuku smiled. Keep an eye out for any trapped civilians. Your quirk is better suited than any of ours to help them. And be ready in case we need to perform Plan B. Uravity nodded with a proud smile. Understood, Deku. You've really taken to leadership roles ever since the license exam. The flustered boy scratched the back of his head. I guess so. Before he could continue, a loud roar disrupted the space around them. WhatIf! The villain screamed as he charged toward 𝐻𝐸𝐴. 𝐻𝐸𝐴 aimed her hands at the villain, but her mind was slightly elsewhere. Maybe after this is all over, I can ask what his horns are for. Ryukyu said I can't just ask random questions while I fight. But I bet he hangs Christmas decorations on them. Green wave. 2 spiral beams shot from 𝐻𝐸𝐴's palms and slammed into the villain, stopping him in his tracks and pushing him several meters back. But he was still standing and looking more or less unfazed. The villain grinned. That all you got? 𝐻𝐸𝐴 looked surprised. Wow, that was one of my super moves. How did you tank that? Is that your quirk? Uravity yelled from behind her. Don't tell him that was a super move. 𝐻𝐸𝐴 grinned awkwardly. Oh, oops. The villain pointed his finger at 𝐻𝐸𝐴. I recognize you. You're that blonde freak's sidekick. His grin widened as he cracked his knuckles. Looks like today is my lucky day. You think she'll show if I break every bone in your body? 𝐻𝐸𝐴 put her hands on her hips, sighing dismissively. And what do you want with Ryukyu? Did she dump you or something? The villain scowled. As a matter of fact, she did, literally. It's her fault I've been stuck in prison for the past 2 weeks. That but dumped our getaway car right in the front yard of a police station. The livid bullman dragged a thumb across his neck. I'm here for vengeance. For me. And my crew. 𝐻𝐸𝐴 nodded inquisitively. I see. And what makes you so confident you can beat her? You must have a pretty cool quirk. She asked like she was conducting an interview. The villain smirked. Demonstrate, I do. It's called Ironhide. My body's denser than diamonds. She snickered. Well, that was easy. The villain made a dumb face as awareness struck him. You blue pixie brat. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 smirked curiously. Also, iron hide. Wouldn't it make more sense to call it diamond hide? I mean, you said your body is denser than diamonds, right? Or were you talking about your brain? The villain gaped. Just. Shut up. It sounds cooler. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 folded her arms, unimpressed. Well, that's subjective. The Mad Bull reached for a torn-off car door strewn on the ground. Eat this. He screamed as he threw the door. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 aimed a hand at the door, firing off a wave with just enough force to mail it back at its sender. What she wasn't prepared for, though, was the surprising athletic ability of the villain. The man jumped and landed on the car door thrown at him while it was still in the air and used it as a springboard to jump further and reach 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻. The villain raised his hands over his head, ready to smack 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 back down to earth. Who's dense now, you big dumb pixie? 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 didn't have time to charge up another attack. She tried to get out of the way, but there wasn't enough time. Just as 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 thought she was screwed, she heard a yell. Delaware smash, Air Force. Bolts of air smashed into the horned villain's chest, and another 4 went to his face, throwing him off. At the same time, an elongated tongue wrapped around 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻's waist, pulling her to safety. Landing next to Froppy, 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 gave a smile. Thanks for the save. Froppy responded with a thumbs up. No problem, Ribbit. Wait, where's Uravity? 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 wondered. She's freeing people from all the debris. Froppy pointed a thumb to Uravity, currently lifting cars and rubble off helpless bystanders. Oh, good on her. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 smiled. The villain landed HRD on the ground. Who's the JRK who shot air at my face? Charged the villain, powering himself up to 20%. That would be me. The bullman turned to face Izuku, making a bring it on gesture. That's so. Well, come at me, you big green blowdryer. Deku leapt into the air, twisting his body to help deliver a powerful kick. Manchester smash. Izuku drove the punch of his iron saws into the side of the villain's head, forcing it to twist to the side. A small shockwave erupted as his foot sank in. Deku landed on the ground, looking up to assess the damage to the villain. But as the boy looked, he saw no movement at all. The villain held firm as his shadow seemed to encompass Izuku's form with sheer menace. The villain laughed. Oh ho ho. Not bad, kid dash. The villain slowly twisted his head back to face Izuku, a sick grin covering his features. I think you left a scuff mark. Izuku stared. This feels uncomfortably familiar. The young hero then leapt back, putting distance between himself and the villain, a look of frustration about him. Guess this means his quirk also applies to his organs. He doesn't even look remotely concussed. Why doesn't my Manchester smash work on anyone? The villain continued to grin. You're pretty strong, kid. Why don't I introduce myself? The name's Dozer, the toughest man in Japan. How about you? Izuku breathed and dropped into a fighting stance. Deku, the hero who saves everyone with a smile. He grinned. All right, let's see whether that kick was just a fluke. The villain knelt down, looking ready to charge like an angry bull. Izuku got himself ready. But based on that first attack, he knew how this fight would end. The only way he was putting this villain down was to go beyond 20%, beyond what he could currently handle, but he couldn't do that. He promised he would avoid hurting himself from now on. That left only one option. Izuku got himself ready to fight and shouted out. Uravity, Plan B. Just what do you think you're doing? Dozer looked in the direction of the other heroes. But before he could get a good look, Deku had already reached him, delivering a swift kick to Dozer's side. The villain gritted his teeth as Deku glared. Your focus should be on me. Uravity turned away from the most recent victim she liberated, hearing Deku's call. She looked over all the victims one last time to ensure she freed all she could before running over to Froppy and 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻. Froppy, did you hear that? Loud and clear. The frog hero called back. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 looked puzzled. What's Plan B? Uravity smiled. You'll see. Just help Deku distract the villain for us. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 shrugged. Alrighty then. She then flew over to the fight. Meanwhile, Izuku and the villain were currently trading blows. Despite how the man described his quirk, he was surprisingly agile. Not at all like Kirishima, who stiffened up because of his quirk. Dozer swung a right hook at Deku's head. Not too shabby. Izuku ducked, sending a hook of his own into the villain's stomach. You should surrender while you can, he stated as his fist sank into the villain's gut. Dozer only grinned. Fat chance, kid. Little did he know that 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 was now floating in the air behind him, aiming a finger gun right at the back of his head. Discharging another salvo, the spirally wave smacked into Dozer, causing him to tilt forward as Deku delivered a follow-up kick straight to his jaw, causing the villain to spin in place and back up a few steps. Dozer regained his composure. Son of a... The villain turned to look up at 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻. Well, screw you too, you pixie fart. He flipped her off. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 grimaced, raising both her hands at the villain. You want to say that again? Meanwhile, Uravity and Froppy were getting ready. Uravity placed a hand on her chest, activating her quirk on herself as Froppy wrapped her tongue around Uravity's waist. Ready? Froppy croaked. Just don't toss me at the wrong thing, okay? Uravity smiled awkwardly. I still can't believe we agreed to this. Ribbit. Uravity hung her head. Neither can I. Well, no time like the present. Time for a Froppy fastball special. The frog hero knelt down. Uravity essayed in air, partially to quell her anxiety and to curb her motion sickness. Alright, let's do this. Froppy spun in place, swinging Uravity, who was already struggling to hold her lunch as the froggy partner continued to accelerate. Reaching top speed, she threw Uravity toward the villain. Uravity held firm, her cheeks puffed out, holding back the flood from her gut, with the wind rushing past the gravity girl as the distance closed between her and Dozer. It was a good thing she had a helmet. Deku and 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 were slamming the stubborn villain with attacks, continuing to distract him while barely being able to do any noticeable damage. Uravity cancelled her quirk mid-flight, allowing gravity to take hold of her once more. She reached out her hand towards the villain. Hope you like flying, j. Dozer, who had his back turned, was not ready for what happened next. What first stood out was someone smacking the villain on the back of his head. He turned quickly. The hell? Dozer then noticed two things. 1. A pink-clad girl was skidding on the ground just past him. 2. His feet were no longer touching the ground. Oh, CRP. Then he noticed a boy clad in green lightning storming toward him. S. Lewis dash, Dozer panicked. Oh, CRP. Smash. Izuku delivered a power kick right into the villain's stomach. A deep squelching was heard as Dozer was sent rocketing into the sky. Oh, CRH. His voice continued to echo as he disappeared into the clouds. Deku, not skipping a beat, looked at the civilians around him. Alright, everyone needs to evacuate. It's not safe here. A man holding his phone, who was clearly recording the whole affair, spoke up. But didn't you just beat the villain? Izuku sighed. No, we're not done yet. The villain still has to come back down. The man looked annoyed, along with many of the other civilians. But we dash, 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻, still in the air, spoke down to the civilians. You heard him. Get going unless you want to be splattered by a villain-shaped meteor. The civilians quieted down and distanced themselves from where the villain was likely to fall. Thankfully, no one had any crippling injuries, including the formerly trapped victims. Izuku turned to Uraraka. How are you holding up? Uraraka had a slightly sickly look about her. I should be good for a bit. But he is surprisingly heavy. She pointed to the sky. Alright, we should get clear as well. Uravity, Deku, and 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 returned to where Froppy was and turned their gaze to the sky. Is everyone clear? Deku asked. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 nodded. Looks like it. Izuku nodded and breathed. Alright, Uravity, do it. The gravity hero slowly breathed as she placed her hands together. I know that guy was tough, but I hope this doesn't kill him. Considering what 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 and I were dealing with, it shouldn't be a worry. Izuku continued to gaze into the sky. This is the only thing I could think of to bring down a guy that strong. This should be more than a match for what 100% is capable of. It might cause some damage to the street, but so long as it takes down the villain, we should be fine. Uraraka's fingers finally touched, ending her quirk's effect. What followed was a moment of silence. All four heroes stood awkwardly, some scratching the backs of their heads, others checking the time. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐺 spoke up. Man, this is taking a dash. Before she could finish, that silence was replaced by the screams of a freaked-out dot in the sky that slowly grew into a man-shaped villain. APP. Dash boom. The ground shook with immense force. The heroes barely kept their footing as dust and debris were scattered everywhere. All they could do was stare. There were shocked looks on everyone from the sheer level of sheer destruction that appeared in front of them. The massive gaping hole that was now the ground seemed to extend from one sidewalk to the other, making it almost impossible to reach the end of the street. Everything went still. None of the heroes could breathe as they prayed that they had at least succeeded in stopping the villain. But then they heard a noise. Subtle shifting noises, displacement of rubble that gradually became louder and louder. Finally, they heard a grunt as a hand appeared at the crater's edge. Lifting himself up from the hole, Dozer showed himself in full view. Aside from some torn clothes, Dozer was completely unscathed. "Is that all you got, you punks?" the bullman bellowed. Izuku watched in horror. "No, this can't be happening." Uraraka fell to her knees. No, anything but this." Azui could only stare, her irises turning white from dread. Dozer, who saw the panic-stricken heroes, laughed at their misery. "That's right, I'm the strongest there is. I'm indestructible." But what Dozer didn't realize was that the heroes weren't panicking over him, at least not really. No, their problems were more immense than some measly villain. Thanks to their extended stay at the police station, post the events of the Yakuza raid, all three of them had been given a crash course on the inner workings of being a hero. Most notably, hero insurance, a seemingly innocuous 5-syllable term that brought even the mightiest heroes to their knees. What exactly is hero insurance, you may ask? Well, it covers many things one would typically expect of insurance: hospital bills, funds for broken support gear, etc. But there was one unique thing that was covered by it, and that was property damage. In this world, it was a legal requirement for all heroes to pay for any damage they were directly responsible for and couldn't justify. For example, if you broke open a fire hydrant and used a water-based quirk to extinguish a fire while the fire department was ages away, that would likely be considered justified. Counterexample: if you punched a villain through a building, making it collapse on top of him when the punch itself already knocked him out, that would be considered excessive force and very unjustifiable. But you see, not everyone can afford to pay for those damages. And that is where hero insurance comes in. It effectively acts as a loan for heroes to pay off any damage they were responsible for. Unfortunately, this meant they'd be going into debt, and no one wanted to be in debt. But that wasn't the problem for our three depressed amigos. Oh no, they were just interns. They didn't have hero insurance yet. They had to rely on a benefactor's insurance. In other words, Ryukyu's insurance. If there was one thing our students were clear on, no one wanted to be in debt because of an intern. But while Ryukyu's fury was something to be appreciated, even that wasn't quite what terrified them. What put fear into their beings was how it was common for interns to be forced to repay the debt for any damage they were responsible for. And between the massive, Lord knows how deep, hole in front of them, combined with the countless recordings and onlookers who could attest that their efforts did nothing to stop the villain. As far as the trio was concerned, they were all doomed. Uraraka began to cry. "Mum, Dad, I'm so sorry. I wasted money instead of earning it." Izuku continued to gape, his hands covering his face. "But why did I think that would work? Why did I gamble that?" Azui's placid face did well to hide her turmoil. "I guess my little sis isn't going to college." 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐺 took charge. "Guys, focus. We still need to bring this guy down." The three devastated heroes looked toward their leader and attempted to refocus on their opponent. Deku tried to brainstorm. "Come on, think Izuku, there has to be something we can do." He considered the fight so far. The only odd thing he could think about at this moment was how completely undamaged Dozer looked. It shouldn't be possible. Even if he was denser than diamonds, a fall like that should have left cracks on his body. In fact, the more he thought about it, the way his kicks and punches sank into him didn't make sense if his body was actually that hard. It also wouldn't explain how mobile he was. If anything, it was more like his body was extraordinarily tough. Kind of like the first Nomu that attacked USJ. Izuku cupped his chin. Did he mislabel his quirk? Is it more akin to something like impact absorption? If that were the case, this opponent would be really problematic for them. That Nomu could take hundreds of full-powered blows from All Might, and even then, it was still completely intact when they recovered it. There was nothing in their arsenal that could put someone like that down. Dozer cackled. Like it matters. There is nothing you guys can do to stop me. I am indestructible. 𝐒𝐽𝐸𝐴 fired a beam directly at the villain's mouth. You talk too much. Froppy, try to hold him down. We need to put the cuffs on him. Froppy leapt into action, flinging her tongue out to wrap around Dozer. The tongue coiled around him, seeming to hold him in place. Dozer laughed again. You think that'll stop me? He spat as he began to flex and push apart Froppy's tongue. The girl strained in response. I can't hold him. 𝐒𝐽𝐸𝐴 tried to fly swiftly towards Dozer, 𝐻&DCFFS in hand. But it was too late. Dozer threw off Froppy's tongue, causing it to backlash and smack 𝐒𝐽𝐸𝐴 out of the air. Uravity quickly ran up and tapped 𝐒𝐽𝐸𝐴 in time to help break her fall before looking back to everyone else. We need a plan, guys. Izuku put his brain into overdrive. Trying to come up with anything, he looked at Dozer, then at Froppy, and a realization finally came to him. He's not that strong. Regardless of how tough his quirk made him, Dozer's actual damage output was nothing compared to the Nomu or even someone like Muscular. Back when the boy was trading blows with Dozer, none of the villain's punches held a candle to some of the injuries Izuku had before. At the time, he thought Dozer was toying with him. But if that wasn't the case, that would explain why it took Dozer considerable effort to break away from Froppy's tongue. Dozer wasn't weak, sure, but his strength was certainly manageable. If they could get the cuffs on him, it should be more than enough to stop him. The question now was how were they going to get Dozer to hold still? Izuku could only think of one thing. So, while I could grab and restrain people as M-limit, you might be able to grab and tear down a building. 𝐒𝐽𝐸𝐴, do you still have the cuffs? The Bluite looked a little bewildered. Yeah. Good. Get them ready. I'll restrain Dozer, but I don't know how long I can hold him. Froppy and Uravity became very concerned, looking at him questioningly. Deku, you're not going to do something reckless again, are you? Aren't your arms still bad? Ribbit. Izuku sighed and smiled. Don't worry about me. I swore I wouldn't be that stupid anymore. How could I make people smile if I'm stuck in a hospital? Dozer turned to Deku, cackling. Oh. Big words, shrimp. Sure you're ready for round 2. Izuku charged back up to 20%. Plenty. Perhaps his body was finally adjusting, but Izuku didn't feel as stiff this time. He got down, ready to rush once more, as Dozer braced himself. Izuku pushed back on his legs, practically exploding toward Dozer, leaving a massive trail of dust behind him. Dozer raised his arms to his face to block whatever came at him. That kick didn't work before, and it won't work this time. Izuku gritted his teeth and aimed his fists at Dozer. Delaware Smash, Air Force. Bolts of air were once again sent flying towards Dozer. One hit his exposed gut, 2 went to his left leg, and another 2 hit his right, leaving the last 3 to hit his arms. Dozer was forced to break his guard, his arms flinging behind his head. Arg. You little... Izuku aimed his hands, focusing all his thoughts. Now for the last touch. This is going to sting. Black bind. Several tendrils erupted from Deku's arms. One wrapped around both of Dozer's elbows, and another took to his knees. With the last tendril wrapping around his shoulders across his chest. Izuku, still going full tilt at Dozer and unable to stop, leapt into the air, flipping over Dozer's head and landing behind him. Deku pulled the tendrils taut, forcing the villain to put his arms behind his back. Dozer freaked. What the hell is this? As he tried to shake the tendrils off, the other 3 heroes simply looked on in wonder, baffled by what they witnessed. Deku strained. Growling, handcuffs. Please. 𝐻𝐬𝐽 discarded her shock and rose to action. On my way. Landing behind Dozer, 𝐻𝐬𝐽 quickly slapped the cuffs onto his wrists and placed another set at his ankles for good measure. Seeing the villain finally restrained, Izuku let go. His arms were stinging in pain that he could only describe as pins and needles times at least they weren't broken. Really need to find a way to deal with this backlash. Dozer whined. This is bullshit. He had 2 quirks. That's not fair. He yelled while hopping in place, but the cuffs gave the villain a mild electric shock after misinterpreting his frustrated skips as an attempt to escape, which led Dozer to fall on his face. Arg. 𝐻𝐬𝐽 placed a foot on the villain's head. Pipe down, will you? You lost fair and square. She then coughed into her hand. Now tell me what your horns are for. Dozer looked very confused and very annoyed. Uraraka and Azui ran up to Deku, and he knew they would have questions. Deku, since when could you do that? Uraraka gaped. Do you have 2 quirks, Midoriya? Azui riveted. Izuku sighed, his mind racing a mile a minute. It's a new super move I've been working on. You mean that black stuff is part of your quirk? Uraraka said with surprise. Yeah, it is. Technically not a lie. He thought. Azui placed a finger on her cheek. I'm surprised it's black though. Usually your power glows green. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Yeah, crazy, right? Thankfully for Izuku, Dozer was not done with his tirade as he screamed from the ground. It's not over yet, brats. I can still bite ya ankles. Come at me. All the heroes gave him a deadpan stare except for Uravity, who slowly walked up to Dozer, kneeling down to his level, and smacked him across the face, triggering her quirk. She then dragged him by his collar up to eye level, giving him the coldest glare she had. You know what you're going to do. You're going to stay quiet, so I don't have to launch you into space. You may be indestructible, but I'm pretty sure you still need to breathe like the rest of us. Dozer stared back at her, aghast. Why you can't do that? If I die, you're screwed. Uraraka grabbed both sides of the villain's head and forcefully turned it to face the giant crater in the street. Do you see that hole? Dozer nodded uncomfortably. She twisted his head back to face her, her soulless eyes bearing down on him. Good, then you understand that I'm already screwed. So, I don't have any issue with dragging a villain down with me if I feel like it. So, you're going to stop resisting? Or this villain is turning into the world's shoddiest astronaut. Uravity's face morphed into a horrifying, sickly grin, causing the villain to shiver. Uraraka's face reminded the villain of his mother when she would punish him, back when his quirk had yet to fully develop. The savage spankings he would get. Oh, looks like little Buru hasn't learned his lesson. The mother cracked her knuckles. Dozer, formerly known as Buru, raised his hands from the ground. Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't know. You say that every time. The mother said callously. She grabbed hold of Buru's ankle and started to drag him away. He screamed as he clawed his hands against the ground, fighting in vain. Wait. No. Dozer's young screams echoed in his mind, his trauma forcing him to comply with the hero's demands. Yes, ma'am. He replied, hanging his head. Uravity's demeanor immediately changed. She picked herself up and dusted herself off as if she were done with some dirty business, then smiled as if nothing had happened. Well, that's dealt with. The other heroes merely looked on with concern written all over their faces. Holy CRP Oka. Azui slowly croaked. Uraraka tilted her head. What? Izuku turned to look at the hole, now reminded of its existence. I can't believe it's that big. It shouldn't be that big. All sense of reverie was swiftly taken out of his sails when he realized what he had just accomplished with Dozer's capture. It only further showed how unnecessary it was to drop him from orbit. They had entirely overestimated the threat. Izuku placed a hand on his forehead, his arms still stinging. Ryukyu is going to be so mad. Ryuko and Eri were walking hand in hand down the street. The Dragoon hero had opted for more casual attire to reduce the odds of being noticed, for her sake and Eri's. Ryuko was wearing a white short-sleeve hoodie underneath a black vest paired with jeans and leather boots. Currently, her hood was up. You know, based on first impressions, no one would ever guess how much of a tomboy Ryukyu actually is. Tempest snarked suddenly. Oh hush. So, I prefer breathes, so what? The ever-present voice laughed. It's not just the breathes. Your entire wardrobe is like this except for your hero outfit. It's like the only dress you own. Ryuko frowned. And the only reason it is a dress is for convenience with my quirk. Super stretchy breathes, no matter how well they are designed, always lose their elasticity. Eventually, it was a necessary compromise. Oh, compromise, you say? Then what about the boots? Your absurdly expensive, custom-made boots. The internal dragon began to list with its non-existent digits. That has shred and repair, bulletproof lining, and GPS tracking built into them so that you can find them again after you transform. Ryuko blushed. I already had to give up on breathes. I wasn't losing my boots. They're part of who I am. They are literally the most expensive gear you have. And all they really do is repair themselves after getting destroyed by your transformation. Tempest huffed before continuing with her rant. You could have just gotten special footwear that would work with your quirk, but you had to make your favorite boots a part of your costume. Ryuko flicked her nose. I'm allowed to indulge myself a little. End of discussion. Tempest sighed again. But know that you are the epitome of every woman who wears multiple shoe sizes too small just because they like the footwear. Ryuko ignored the comment and turned to look at Eri, who was taking in all the sights and sounds, rapidly turning her head back and forth with a look of glee in her eyes. The dragoness smiled at that before continuing her conversation. Do you think the others are okay? The Sastile shrugged. They're probably fine. What's the worst that could happen? Ryuko sighed quietly. I really wish you'd stop saying that. Don't tell me you believe in jinxes, Ryuko. Ryuko's gaze became distant. Considering everything that has happened lately, I'm beginning to wonder. She looked up into the wide-open sky, feeling incredibly small in the world. I can only hope life will get better. Tempest, feeling Ryuko's melancholy, relented and replied wistfully. Me too, Ryuko. Me too. So, what do you think so far, Eri? Ryuko looked down at the girl beside her. I missed feeling the sun. The girl sighed happily. Ryuko had mixed sentiments toward that response. She decided to just focus on being happy for her. That's good to hear, Eri. The pair had been walking the streets of Terisu City for quite some time. This city was Ryukyu's base of operations and hometown. It wasn't the largest city in the Kansai region, but it had plenty of sights and destinations to enjoy. At least in Ryuko's opinion, though she will admit she's biased. Since Eri hadn't had the chance to tour the place yet, Ryuko decided now was a good time to show off her hometown to her newly appointed ward. Ryuko felt a pang of disappointment in herself at that term. What am I doing? Truth be told, Ryuko wasn't entirely comfortable referring to Eri as her daughter, which she felt guilty about. While Eri might refer to her as Mama, legally speaking, that wasn't accurate. Ryuko indeed took custody of her, but she wasn't Eri's legal guardian. That was a much more time-consuming process, and as it stood, Ryuko still wasn't sure if that was best for Eri in the long run. Being both a parent and a hero wasn't impossible, but you didn't need to look far to tell that it wasn't easy, and as Tempest had pointed out in many ways, Ryuko was already messing that up. But ultimately, that was what today was meant to make up for. Ryuko could worry about the logistics of being Eri's legally recognized parent later. So, what exactly is the game plan here? Tempest suddenly chimed in. Ryuko almost scoffed. What? You don't know? You have, like a dozen places going through your mind. I can't tell what you're thinking. Oh, so you can be fooled. I was wondering about that. Tempest freaked at her snarking host. You're doing that intentionally. How the heck are you doing that? Ryuko smiled proudly at herself. Like I'm going to tell you. Now I can keep my thoughts to myself when I want to. Oh, I see how it is. Let's see how long you can keep this up, sister. 'Cause you can't keep me out forever. I will have my schadenfreude. The overgrown skink shook an imaginary fist at its host. Ryuko was merely amused by the threat. We'll see about that. But to answer your first question, I'm taking Eri for a quick tour around town and might finish up by visiting a Quirk center. Tempest shifted her mood and nodded sagely. I suppose it's not the worst plan. That way, Eri can meet some kids like herself in a safe environment. My thoughts exactly. Thanks to the rising cases where people were seriously harmed by children with a new quirk, the government decided that extra care was needed for these children. After all, what can a poor, barely scraping by family do about a child who has no control and can melt houses? Quirk centers were environments created in response to these cases and the Quirk singularity doomsday theory that had become so popular. These environments had specially trained staff and a robust infrastructure. Both were intended to handle various quirks and were made freely accessible to the public to help these children control their new powers and hopefully guide them away from the path of a villain. However, truth be told, the previous Prime Minister only created Quirk centers to boost his ratings, sidestepping all the complaints that the government was doing nothing to help small-income homes with no recourse. In many opinions, Quirk centers were quite underwhelming in what they actually achieved, the general sentiment being, well, I guess they're better than nothing. This was a view shared by our draconic heroine, but she figured they might still prove beneficial, at least in this instance. So, where are we going next, Mama? The little girl chirped. Why don't I show you my favorite place to eat? Lunch might have only been a couple of hours ago, but all this exploring was no doubt working up an appetite. There was no harm in having a light meal. Eri smiled. Okay. Ryukyu led Eri to an extensive restaurant district in the city. There was all manner of places to eat. Italian, Chinese, fine dining, and, of course, the big, nigh-immortal fast food giants that somehow managed to stand the test of time, no matter how many lawsuits were thrown at them. The Colonel, the Golden Arches, and that creepy but king. Why they still kept that freaky man as a mascot baffled Ryukyu endlessly. They didn't even bother to redesign him in over 2 centuries. But ignoring all that, Eri and Ryukyu found themselves standing in front of a run-down-looking little place called the Misha. Ryukyu had a nostalgic-looking expression on her as she surveyed the building. Despite the name, the establishment had more quality and variety than anyone would expect from a place with shack in the title. Eri eyed the sign, squinting as she did so. He mat sheep. She turned to Ryukyu uncertainly. Ryukyu gave an apologetic smile. Nice try, Eri, but it's pronounced the meat shack. The girl nodded with a bit of frustration. Meat shack, okay? Ryukyu patted her on the head. You're getting better, Eri. You'll get there, I promise. You only need to keep working at it, keep learning. Eri sighed slightly. Okay, Mama. The girl's reading skills improved with what little Ryukyu could do, but it was still far behind what it should be at her age. They really needed to find that tutor. I still can't believe they just called it the meat shack. There'd be so many more customers if they had a better name. The disembodied dragon huffed. I prefer a quiet atmosphere. It feels more homely. Yeah, I know. But I also know you agree with me on the name, or at least you did when you first came here. True enough. Ryukyu turned to the girl beside her. Why don't we head in, Eri? You must be hungry by now, right? Eri's stomach made an audible gurgle as the small girl blushed. Yes. The blonde smiled, taking the girl's hand in her own. Let's see what we can get you. The pair stepped inside. The meat shack was one of those oddly illusory places that managed to look smaller on the outside than it was on the inside. In contrast to its name, the interior of the building seemed almost fancy by comparison. It had proper dining tables and chairs, a fully equipped bar off to the side for drinks, and decorated walls. It wasn't a ritzy joint, but it would definitely leave any newcomer baffled by the impression it gave from the outside. But the smell the environment created was what was truly striking. It was carnal and juicy in ways that would offend vegan sensibilities everywhere, likely not comprehending that the establishment catered to such sensibilities. Ryukyu, who was only slightly hungry when she entered, felt starved. She needed to get her hands on what was making that wonderful aroma, and this needed to happen right now. From the look on Eri's face, she had the same idea. Thankfully for their gullets, a friendly face welcomed Ryukyu. Ah, Miss Tatsuma. It is good to see you. And I see you have a wonderful little plus one with you. A man decked in high-class waiter's attire greeted them, again entirely at odds with the restaurant's name and exterior. It's good to see you too, Subarashi. Ryuko gestured to the white-haired girl. This is Eri. Say hello, Eri. Hello, Mr. Subarashi. The girl waved awkwardly. Hello to you too, Eri. It is wonderful to meet you. The man gave a deep curtsy, then turned to Ryuko. Shall I fetch you your usual table, madam? Ryuko smiled, almost rolling her eyes. Yes, you may. Subarashi gave yet another curtsy. Wonderful. He then walked away, beckoning them to follow. Tempest sighed. Why he doesn't put this much effort outside the building is beyond me. Perhaps the man likes irony. Or something. I don't really get it either. The pair followed the man to a nice, elevated corner of the building that provided a great view of the outside and inside of the restaurant. Taking their seats, Eri continued swiveling her head, taking in all the sights and sounds around her in what seemed like endless curiosity. Ryuko couldn't help but smile at how adorable it was. Will it be the usual, mademoiselle? The waiter seemed to speak in what was probably supposed to be a French accent. Ryuko closed her eyes briefly. Here we go. She loved the food and people here, but Subarashi could be a little OTT. Yes, the usual will be great, thank you. Subarashi turned toward Eri. And for the little miss? Eri scratched her head with slight apprehension. Something with apples. The waiter nodded sagely. Wonderful, I think I know just the thing. I'll be right back, my lady. The man turned and made his way to the kitchen. We're in a place called the Meat Shack, and we're being served by a fancy Japanese waiter with a forced French accent. None of this makes sense. Tempest groaned, placing a claw on her fictitious face. It is a unique experience. Ryuko concurred with an awkward smile. Oh God, I just remembered I have to watch you eat again. Okay. Kill me now. Ryuko could feel Tempest making like an ostrich and burying her head into the floor of their collective subconscious. Ryuko sighed slightly at her tenant and then turned to her dependent. So, Eri, what do you think of the place? It's way bigger than I thought. The girl murmured, still glancing around. Yeah, I thought the same thing when I first came here. How long has Mama been coming here? Ryuko looked up contemplatively. I think around the time I first got my hero license. It was a really hectic time for me back then. Her features found a balance between tragedy and nostalgia. And Subarashi and the rest of the staff did their best to cheer me up at the time. So, I decided to keep coming back ever since. Eri smiled back. So, Subarashi is really nice. Yes, he is very kind, though he's a little eccentric. Eccentric. The girl pondered the new word. It means different or unusual. The hero awkwardly gesticulated, trying to find non-offensive terms. Eri could only nod uncertainly. Okay. Shortly after this conversation, the dubiously French waiter returned with their meals. Bon appetit, miladies. He gave a brief bow after placing the food on the table. Well, that was surprisingly quick. The voice said with slight sarcastic amazement. Thank you, Subarashi, Ryuko replied. In front of Ryuko was her favorite dish, something admittedly far removed from a light meal. Thick cuts of Wagyu beef, coated with melted butter and sprinkled with black pepper and salt, with a side of assorted vegetables coated with Kewpie dressing. Miraculously, the experience of force-feeding herself beef somehow didn't put her off it permanently. If anything, her appetite was as vast as it's always been. An aspect of herself that Ryuko often attributed to her quirk. In front of Eri was a much smaller plate with a tiny apple pie and diced apples on top of some applesauce-coated chicken. Eri salivated at the meal, then frowned when she saw something off to the side. Are those Brussels sprouts? Subarashi laughed heartily. Yes, they are young, miss. But trust me, they will be more wonderful than any you've had before. Eri eyed the man suspiciously as Ryuko chimed in. Give it a go, Eri. It's good for you. And the chef here knows what they're doing. Eri sighed, picking up a fork and slowly and painstakingly bringing it over to one of the sprouts. Stabbing the fork with perhaps more force than was necessary, She brought the leafy substance to her face. She squinted her eyes, taking a quick whiff of the vegetable that, to Eri, might as well be a green tumor. Her expression relaxed slightly, almost as if to say, well, it doesn't smell bad. She finally brought the loaded fork to her mouth, scrunching her eyes shut as she prepared herself for imminent demise. Ryuko and Subarashi smiled with encouragement. Eri bit down on the sprout, and her face immediately changed to shock and awe. It tastes like a candy apple. Subarashi beamed from ear to ear. Indeed, that is our head chef's special quirk. It allows him to alter the taste of certain foods. I felt you had a bit of a sweet tooth. Ryuko smiled as well. See, what did I tell you, Eri? Eri didn't respond. She just continued to stuff her face with the candy Brussels sprouts, leaving the two adults to laugh harmoniously at the spectacle before them. After Eri and Ryuko finished and paid for their meals, they started to take their leave, stopping at the door and bidding Subarashi farewell. The food was great as always, Subarashi. Make sure Kobe has my thanks. Ryuko bowed lightly. Wonderful. You're welcome, Miss Tatsuma. I'll see to it that our chef is properly thanked. The waiter bowed in turn. Ryuko then gestured to Eri. Realizing the cue, the girl then bowed. Thank you for the food, Mr. Subarashi. The waiter smiled once more. You're very welcome, wonderful young miss. Do stop by again. He bowed anew. He's going to do in his back one of these days with all that bowing. Ryuko disregarded the remark from her resident backseat driver. We'll be sure to visit again. Though I have to ask, perhaps thanks to all the sudden and radical changes in her life. All the anxiety and instability that came with them, that years-old nagging question in Ryuko's mind, now floated to the surface. Are you really okay with how things are? She asked, looking at the mostly empty restaurant. Subarashi sighed. I understand your concern, Miss Tatsuma. I agree that we could perform and serve larger masses and likely make more profit if we changed a few things and put ourselves out more. He then turned, gesturing at the building around him. But what we really want is a quiet, squared-away space for ourselves, serving those with the wonderful initiative to find us. Many of us have a history, and we'd like to keep it to ourselves. Ryuko nodded. I see. I just worry sometimes. Subarashi gave a warm smile. And that concern is appreciated. It is one of the many reasons we're so fond of you. But we aren't doing that poorly, especially if we have an esteemed customer like yourself. Smiled finally. Thanks, Subarashi. I will. Ensure you take care of your wonderful self and the young lady next to you, of course. I will. And with that, the pair made their way back into the outside world. Do you think Papa has eaten yet? The small girl asked. Ryuko pondered, glancing skyward. I would imagine he has. I wouldn't worry too much, Eri. Your father's smart. He knows what he's doing. 𝐒𝐻𝐸𝐴 floated herself high into the air, surveying the damage on the ground, a hand over her eyes to keep the sun out. Wow. I think I can see a bunch of busted pipes down there. I think the plumbing is ruined for this entire district. While the senior announced with unconcerned amazement, our trio of first years was currently nursing themselves, desperately trying to calm down while emergency services were arriving on the scene. Uraraka had assumed the fetal position, rocking herself back and forth. This isn't real. This isn't real. Izuku was leaning against a wall, pressing a single hand against it. Mom and Dad don't have the money for this. They can barely afford the apartment. Azui, despite her calm demeanor, was currently screaming internally. I take it back. Neither of my siblings are going to college. 𝐒𝐻𝐸𝐴 floated back down and looked at the tortured interns. You know, I feel like there's something I'm supposed to tell you all. Something about our public image. She cupped her chin, thinking hard before waving her hand dismissively. It can't be that important. A small distance away, a father and his daughter walked down the sidewalk. The girl pointed at the heroes. Daddy, why are the heroes so sad? The father paused, turning to look at the heroes. He gave a long, discerning squint. That, right there, is a classic case of debt remorse. The man stated, shaking his head. The girl tilted. What's debt? The father patted the girl on the head, a dire look on his face. I hope you never know, sweetie. I hope you never, ever know. Some time has passed at this point. Ryuko and Eri visited many landmarks and places of cultural significance throughout the city. It proved to be a good change of pace and educational for Eri. Now they were making their way to the Quirk Center. Thankfully, it wasn't too far from their previous destination. After a brisk walk down a block, they found themselves in front of the center. It was a small building, mostly painted white, and felt rather lifeless when you looked at it, perhaps even a little dingy. The pair stepped inside, seeing the interior for the first time. The space was akin to a dilapidated community center. The paint was peeling off the ceiling and walls, the carpet looked decades old, and the lady at the front desk looked oh so terribly bored. Ryuko took Eri's hand and walked up to the front desk. Eri herself looked a little concerned about her surroundings. Excuse me, we would like to use the facilities here. May we enter? The hero asked professionally. The bored woman responded without even looking up, pointing to a door in the back. Yeah, go ahead. Ryuko held in a sigh. Thank you. Once again securing Eri's hand, Ryuko made her way to the door, hoping that this wasn't a terrible mistake. One of the most significant issues faced by the Quirk Centers was their incredible lack of funding. Despite the promises made by the government, very little commitment was made to maintain these facilities. Most of them relied heavily on donations and charitable pro-heroes willing to make time to help kids that the staff couldn't deal with themselves. Speaking of which, as the pair made their way to the primary part of the building, Ryuko spotted a familiar face. Mandalay. Shino Sosaki, also known as Mandalay, turned to face Ryuko. Ryukyu, what are you doing here? Ryuko smiled at the woman, fully decked out in her hero gear. I was just about to ask you that. This place is ages away from your agency. The red cat hero blushed. Well, you see, there was a bit of a mix-up. We were contacted by this place because they had a child who had a sort of telepathic quirk. So, they wanted to get a hold of me. The thing is, when we agreed, we didn't realize how far away it was. Let me guess, Pixie Bob didn't check first and just agreed on your behalf. Mandalay sighed. Yeah. Ryuko can be unreliable like that sometimes. Wait, I don't mean you, Ryuko. I mean Dash. The dragoness waved her hand. I know what you mean, Shino. We've been over this. Pixie Bob and I have the same name, though I'm pretty sure she uses different kanji. The feline relaxed. Right, sorry. I wasn't sure if you remembered. It has been a while. Anyway, how are you, Tetsu? Ryuko grinned and turned to look down at Eri. Well, I figured Eri here might be able to make some friends. Mandalay followed Ryuko's gaze, seeing the small girl beside her. Oh, so you're Eri. It's nice to meet you. She knelt down to be at eye level. Eri blushed slightly at the attention. Hello. Ah, she's so cute. Quebec. Eri's blush only deepened as she tried to hide slightly behind Ryuko. Ryuko stroked the girl's hair with reassurance as Mandalay stood back up with a renewed sense of energy about her. You know what, this is perfect. I brought Koda along with me for a similar reason. We can set up a play date. Ryuko smiled. That would be great. Thank you, Shino. Mandalay turned back around, facing the back of the room. Koda, come over here, please. A long, audible sigh could be heard from across the room. A few moments later, a small, grumpy-looking figure with a horned cap dragged their feet up to the trio. Yes, Auntie. Koda Izumi grumbled. There is someone I want you to meet. Shino gestured her hand towards Eri. This is Eri. I think you two should get to know each other. Koda shifted his eyes to Eri, almost scowling as he did so. Why? Shino leaned in and started to whisper. She's been through a lot, Koda. She could use a friend who also knows what it's like to face a villain. Koda's face softened, thinking back to Muscular. She had to deal with a villain. Mandalay's features displayed sorrow. Worse, she had to deal with many villains. She had to be rescued from an entire group mistreating her. I'll talk with her. Mandalay smiled. Thank you, Koda. Try to be extra nice to her. Eri's still trying to get a handle on her quirk. Koda nodded and walked over to Eri, still huddled slightly behind Ryuko. Hi, I'm Koda. he said curtly and stuck out his hand to shake. Eri stared at the hand, somewhat intimidated by the cantankerous-looking boy in front of her. Ryuko put her hand on Eri's back, pushing her slightly towards the horn-capped boy. Go on, don't be shy. Eri took a deep breath and offered a gloved hand to Kota, shaking his hand. Hi, I'm Eri. Nice to meet you. The boy took back his hand and shrugged nonchalantly. Yeah, nice to meet you. So, what's your quirk? I don't really have a name for it yet, but it lets me control time, I think. She said awkwardly. Kota's eyes widened, folding his arms in disbelief. It lets you control time. No way. But it does though. He pointed his finger at her. Prove it. But I can't, I can only use it on people, and that's not safe. Eri flustered. Kota resumed folding his arms and turned up his nose. Then I don't believe you. Eri was starting to get annoyed. But it's true though. Kota turned his head to the side. Don't care. I don't believe something till I see it. Mandalay placed her hands on her hips. Kota, be nice. From what we understand, that is how her quirk works. The boy sighed. Fine, whatever. I'll believe her for now. Kota paused for a moment as he was struck by an epiphany. Wait, why isn't it safe? Eri responded with frankness. 'Cause it can make people disappear forever. Kota looked at the girl in front of him with newfound terror. Then he glanced at his hand that had shaken hers. Ryuko facebombed. It's not that bad. It can only happen if someone touches Eri's skin, and she loses control. Kota calmed down slightly. So, I'm not gonna die, right? No, you're not. Eri has gotten better at controlling it. You aren't going to disappear out of nowhere. The boy exhaled in relief as if recovering from a heart attack. That's good to know. Eri tried to initiate a conversation, attempting to ignore the previous one from bothering her. Do you have a favorite hero? Kota recovered, trying to make himself look cool. I do. He's not well known, but he's still pretty awesome. Only really cool people know about him. What's his name? She asked eagerly. Well, it's not likely you've heard of him, but I'll tell you anyway. His name is Deku. Deku. Yeah, he's super strong and he can throw punches that send villains smashing into mountains. Kota made a pose and threw a punch to emulate Deku. I know Deku. Eri said excitedly. Kota flicked an eyebrow skeptically. Really? Yeah, he rescued me from a bunch of villains. Kota's skepticism drifted to curiosity. Did he? How did he do it? Eri paused, struggling slightly to remember what she was told about her other self. He beat up the big bad boss guy all by himself by flying around in the air and punching him really hard. She jumped and threw her fist into the air. Kota's face screamed suspicion once more. Deku can fly now. That's awesome. He grinned. Ryuko and Mandalay smiled, breathing a sigh of relief, then looked at each other and nodded. Ryuko knelt next to the kids. Mandalay and I are going to go have a chat. Do you think you two can take care of yourselves for a bit? The children nodded while Ryuko smiled back. Good. If you need anything, we won't be far away. Just call for us. The children nodded again and immediately returned to their conversation about heroes, specifically Deku. I bet by the time Deku becomes a pro, he'll have a ton more powers. Maybe he'll shoot lasers out of his eyes. Ryuko and Mandalay grinned at the gabfest. Then they turned to make their way over to a bench near one of the side walls. So, I guess it's true. You did take Eri into your care, Shino stated. And I guess you heard that from UA. Ryuko smirked. Indeed I did. I gotta admit, I'm still surprised you just agreed to it. She said as she sat down. So am I sometimes, but it was the right thing to do, I believe. At least for now. The dragoness replied a bit glumly. Only for now. I'm just not sure I'm doing what's best for her, you know what I mean. Shino hung her head slightly and turned to look at Kota. Actually I do. I know that feeling very well. Ryuko followed her gaze. It's not easy being a parent and a hero, is it? No, it isn't, but that doesn't mean it isn't worthwhile. Ryuko went quiet for a moment. Do you believe I'm doing the right thing? Shino returned a sympathetic smile. Let me ask you this, Tatsu. She gestured toward the two kids in front of them, who were now making wild gestures while smiling and arguing simultaneously. Is Eri safe and happy? Ryuko looked towards the pair. Yes, she is. Shino nodded. You are doing the right thing. I learned a while ago that finding the perfect place for a child is almost impossible. Most of the time, all you can do is make the most of what you can give them. Shino looked somber as she continued to watch the pair. Trying to send them somewhere else can sometimes do more harm than good, even if it's to keep them safe. Ryuko looked at her friends sadly, knowing what followed the events of the summer camp. How vulnerable the PP cats became. Kota didn't want to be sent away, did he? Shino shook her head. He said he didn't care if there was another villain. He didn't want to leave the only family he had left. And I couldn't say no to that. Not after everything he's been through, and not when he had just started smiling again. Ryuko put her hand on Shino's back. These sorts of decisions are never easy to make. But I don't think you made the wrong choice. I know you're capable enough to keep him safe from now on. Thanks, Tetsu. But wasn't I supposed to be cheering you up? You already have, Shino. So, thank you. Shino hung her head with a chuckle. You're welcome, I guess. Not to completely ruin the mood, but don't you have a telepathic child to tend to? Ryuko queried. Oh, they're already gone. You actually caught me when I was getting ready to leave. Ryuko winced slightly. Oh, sorry about that. Mandalay waved her paws. It's all right. I'm glad we talked. And now Kota's got a new friend. It's a win-win if you ask me. Before Ryuko could respond, a staff member came up to them. A simple-looking woman with black hair in a bun was dressed in a light orange vest with a name tag that read, Hana Mukoka. A look of concern graced this woman's features. Is everything okay, Miss Mandalay? Shino turned and gave a reassuring smile. Yes, I'm fine, Mukoka. I'm just catching up with Ryukyu. Hana turned to face Ryuko and did a double-take. Ryukyu. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was you, Miss Ryukyu. I thought you were some random person bothering Mandalay. She bowed profusely. The dragoon hero gestured dismissively. It's all right. Not being recognized is part of why I'm dressed this way. Might I ask what brought you here today? I'm here with a girl I'm taking care of called Eri. She's playing with Kota over there. She pointed to the pair. Hana turned quickly to look. Oh, I see. You truly are an amazing hero, Ryukyu. Providing shelter to a child. Ryuko glanced briefly at Mandalay before responding. It was the right thing to do. Hana then smiled awkwardly back, twiddling her fingers. I don't suppose. Since you're here, could you perhaps offer your services to the other children? She then waved her hands in front of her. Not that there's any pressure, of course. It's entirely up to you. Ryuko grinned. I'll see what I can do. Hana bowed repeatedly. Thank you so much, Ryukyu. It'll cheer up the kids so much just by seeing you in person. Ryuko made to stand from the bench, Shino smiling at her as she did so. I'm afraid I'll be leaving it to you, Ryukyu. I kinda wore myself out earlier today. I'll keep an eye on the kids, though. Ryuko shook her head. It's all right. I can handle it. Thanks. Hana then motioned for Ryuko to follow her. Right this way, please. Ryuko followed after Hana, being led towards one of the specialized rooms. As they walked, the pro couldn't help but eye the woman curiously. She didn't know everything about Quirk centers. But what Ryuko did know is that, like a hero, the staff who worked here needed a license. It wasn't as hard to acquire as a hero license, but it was nothing to sneeze at. It required proof that the individual was safe to work around children, had some teaching background, and, most importantly, had proved they had met the government standard for control over their quirk. While they couldn't use their powers in public as heroes. Quirk center staff were authorized to use their quirk within the confines of a center however the staff deemed necessary, within reason of course. With all that in mind, Ryuko couldn't help but wonder. What role did Hana have here? What was her quirk? Perhaps I'm being a little forward here, but can I ask what you do here, Mukoka? Hana looked a little startled. Omi. Nothing special, Miss Ryukyu. I just tend to the kids like everyone else. Ryuko smiled encouragingly. But I know it's not easy to get a job here. There is a lengthy process involved. I'm just curious is all. Hana blushed a little. Well, yes. Getting the license wasn't easy, but it was probably easier for me than most. How so? The staff member brushed a loose length of hair behind her ear. It's due to a mix of my background and, I guess, my quirk. You see, before I came to work here, I taught at a small school. I see. What did you teach? All sorts of things. Resources were in short supply at the school. So, the few teachers there had to pick up the slack. I taught everything from history to math, Japanese, and also science. She said with a hint of exhaustion. Ryuko was impressed. That's quite remarkable to teach all those subjects. Hana's face colored again. I wasn't all that great at it, though. Eventually, the school had to close down because of funding, and then, after a lot of searching and studying, I found myself here. Hana looked at the paint peeling off the walls and the general deterioration of the building. To be honest, though, I'm still kind of concerned. I can't say that I blame you. Donations can only do so much. Hana sighed. You can say that again. With how things are going, the government might cut our funding entirely if they don't think we're worth it. Ryuko tried to cheer her up. I'm certain there are those who would fight for the centers. Many people still rely on these facilities. Hana tried to force a smile. I suppose. Ryuko felt sorry for her, but she was still curious. So, tried to refocus the conversation. You said your quirk had a part to play in you being hired. What is it exactly? Oh right, sorry. My quirk is pretty useless in most situations. It's called nullification. It makes any quirk that directly affects my body useless. I guess they figured I'd be able to work with kids who had very volatile powers. The poor worker twiddled her fingers again while Ryuko stared, stunned by Hana. Tempest exclaimed while Ryuko was flustered. Holy CRP, she's perfect. Miss Makoka. What if I told you I had a job offer for you? Hana's eyes went wide. See, come again. Ryuko tried to calm down. You see, I need a tutor for Eri, and I think you might be the perfect person for the job. But I'm not that great of a teacher. Eri is way behind in her level of education. She doesn't need the best teacher in the world. She just needs someone patient and knowledgeable to teach her. What's more, your quirk is perfect for her situation if it works as you describe. Hana still showed reluctance. But my quirk is more of an inconvenience than anything. When Mandalay tried to use her quirk on me, I couldn't hear her. And even worse, it can't stop quirks that produce things. Fireballs created by a quirk can still hurt me. Ryuko sighed, putting a hand on Hana's shoulder. Look, Makoka. Your quirk might have limits, but it's ideal for this. From what I understand, Eri's quirk works by directly affecting people through physical contact. Which means you might be able to handle her without constant supervision. Hana calmed herself slightly. Is her quirk really that bad? Ryuko closed her eyes solemnly. She's gotten better at controlling it, but there is still a risk. A simple meet and greet like she's having with Koda is fine. But tutoring her daily can run the risk of something going wrong. But that might not be a concern with you as her tutor. Hana nodded slowly, digesting it. I'll think about it. I'd want to meet her and see where I'd be teaching her first. Ryuko grinned, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a business card for her agency. That's all I can ask. Here's my card if you want to give it a try. Taking the card, she bowed. Thank you, Miss Ryukyu. It's no trouble. If anything, I'm glad I met you. Now, about these kids you mentioned. Hana's face brightened. Right, of course. Just over here. Well, that went pretty well, all things considered. Ryuko stretched, working out a crick in her neck. You can say that again. The session with the kids was tiring, but it went pretty well, partly because there weren't many of them. While she couldn't help most of those children much, some had transformation-esque quirks that she could advise. But now, Eri and Ryuko were back on the street, making their way home. After saying their farewells to Hana, Mandalay, and, of course, Koda. Hana had decided she'd stop by Ryuko's agency later when she had time to properly discuss her position as Eri's tutor. Ryuko was hopeful that she would call back soon. So, Eri, how did things go with Koda? The maternal hero asked. Koda's stupid. The girl pouted. What? But I thought you two were getting along. She balked with concerned confusion. He said Mama wasn't that cool. Mama is super cool. She shook her fists. Ryuko giggled. Well, didn't he say that Deku was cool? Eri folded her arms, still pouting. I guess. Ryuko smiled, stroking Eri's head. By the way, you did a good job back there. You didn't let it slip about your father to Koda. I'm proud of you. Eri calmed down and smiled. No biggie, Mama. Hey, are those our interns? Ryuko turned at Tempest's call to look up the street and saw 4 familiar figures. Hey you 4. Over here. 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐸 turned immediately to face Ryuko, bubbly as always. The other 3, on the other hand, turned much more slowly, shivering in dread as if they were facing death itself. Hey boss. 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐸 called as she rushed up to Ryuko. How are things going? They're going great. We took down a villain all by ourselves. Ryuko's eyes widened. Really? Are you all okay? Papa's not hurt, is he? Eri cried. 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐸 flicked a thumb behind her at the trio. We're all fine. I think Deku and I got a light bruise here and there, but the others are basically uninjured. Ryuko breathed a sigh of relief. Good, so everything went well then. The first-year trio noticeably quivered at that, all of them looking severely ill, like they were going to keel over at any moment. The dragoness tilted her head to get a better look at them. What's wrong with them? 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐸 made a face, simultaneously mournful yet still energetic, pressing the tips of her fingers together. This, well you see, there was some collateral damage. Ryuko looked doubtful. Surely it can't be that bad. Tempest. Yeah, Ryuko. Tempest answered gently. The Dragoon hero stood at the edge of the seemingly bottomless chasm, brought up to speed on what had occurred with her mouth gaping open. Why does it feel like I'm staring into the pit of my soul? Oh. It's a deep, gloomy crevice laden with questionable structural integrity. So, I guess it's not an inaccurate comparison. Ryuko went silent as Tempest shrugged stiffly. Silent for a great. But. The 3 first-years got on their knees behind her. Uraraka spoke up first, tearing up as she did so. We're so sorry, Ryukyu. We're terrible heroes. Ashui came up next. We'll do whatever we can to make up for this. Finally, Midoriya chimed in. This was all my fault. I'm the one who made the call. Please don't punish the others for this. The sad part was that the boy wasn't wrong. He made a bad call. Even if the others agreed to it. Ryuko placed her hands on her face, letting out a long, heavy sigh. It's only been 2 days. Aizawa warned me something like this would happen. I didn't believe him. Why didn't he call for backup instead? Yet, she could feel the gears of her instincts turning, trying to find ways to be lenient with Midoriya. To place the blame squarely on the others somehow. To garner his favor. She turned to face the students, pinching the bridge of her nose. Look, there is nothing we can do about this now. I'll just have to find the money to pay for all this. The 3 kneeling students looked up in awe. Uraraka, speaking up for them with a whimper. You mean you're not going to make us repay the debt? Ryuko gawked at them. Make you pay? Are you crazy? You're just students. You'd never be able to pay this off. What you have would be just a drop in the ocean. Uraraka stared at Ryuko in disbelief before she threw herself and wrapped her arms around Ryuko's leg, bawling her eyes out. 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐸𝐸, 𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻 head. Uravity, please. Control yourself. Uraraka only kept crying. Wag. I thought my family was going to die from DE. The other two first years breathed great sighs of relief. Midoriya himself fell onto his rump, looking like he'd survived a massacre. He looked up at the blonde dragonoid. Is this really okay, Ryukyu? Ryuko, still trying to push Uraraka away, turned back to look at the hole. Yes. It'll probably only cost tens of millions of yen. Enough money to buy several houses. Her voice trailed off, becoming quieter as it did so. As Yui ribbited, that would have SCKD to pay off. Ryuko turned her head back, a noticeable glint in her eyes. Oh, don't get me wrong, you're not off the hook yet. A menacing aura surrounded Ryuko, causing Uraraka to let go and pull herself away in fear. Azui at that moment regretted her words. From this point forward, you will all be spending time as effective janitors at my agency, cleaning everything on top of your regular duties, without additional pay. The trio all went white as a sheet. Azui croaked quietly. But it's a huge building and only 3 of us. And don't you have robots that do that already? Ribbit. Ryuko smirked evilly. Obviously, I'll be suching them off. You'll just have to figure out the rest. Uraraka gawked. For how long? The boss folded her arms. No less than 2 months. Depending on how poorly you all perform, that time will be extended. Understood. The 3 went quiet and nodded, realizing there was no room for debate. 𝐒𝐿𝐲 stepped up next to Ryuko, putting her hands behind her head. Welp, them's the breaks, guys. Ryuko turned coldly to 𝐒𝐿𝐲. And just what do you mean by that? Well, I feel bad for them. They're getting punished. And you think you're not? 𝐒𝐿𝐲 clued in with panic. But it wasn't my idea. Ryuko folded her arms. No, it wasn't. But you were in charge, making it your responsibility for not coordinating them better. You'll be joining them in the cleanup. Am I understood? 𝐒𝐿𝐲's arms sagged. Yes, ma'am. Ryuko then calmed herself and cleared her throat. Now, while all of you bear some responsibility for the travesty that is this gaping crater in the ground, the interns all winced. If nothing else, you kept yourselves and the civilians safe. For a hero, human life should always take precedence, no matter what. I'm glad you're all okay. She smiled, the aura around her dissipating. The tension immediately eased for the interns, all releasing a breath they didn't realize they were holding. Are you sure about all that? I might trade a few of them for tens of millions of yen. Will you stop raining on my parade? The voice laughed. Make me. Ryuko shook her head. Has everything been sorted out with the authorities? 𝐒𝐿𝐲 spoke up once more. Pretty much, but they said they'd contact you later about. You know, that. She pointed at the hole. I figured as much. Let's head back, everyone. The interns all responded in unison. Yes, ma'am. The group started to make their way back to the agency. Ryuko felt exhausted, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. Forcing down her instincts had not been easy. In the end, she had to be lenient with all of them as a compromise for equal treatment, deciding only to make their punishment sound worse than it actually is. Considering how much that gorge would set her back, she was being quite kind to them. Not that she would have made them pay the whole debt themselves. That would have been a little too draconian. No, what she would have likely done was have them repay at least a portion to teach them a lesson in respecting public property. If Midoriya hadn't been involved, she couldn't bring herself to be any harsher than this. Her mind fought with her every step of the way. She glanced briefly at the shrub-haired teen. How can one boy give me this much trouble? Stupid instincts. Yeah, he's kinda turning you into a total simp. Tempest nodded sagely. Gee, thanks, I couldn't tell. Ryuko felt a hand wrap around hers. Everything will be okay, Mama. Eri smiled. The Dragoon hero sighed with a simper. Thanks, Eri. Can someone please get me a replacement? This water's only adding to the mess now. 𝐒𝐿𝐲 asked, cringing at the grimy, tainted mop as it was lifted out of the bucket. Coming right up. Izuku called, rushing over with a rag in hand. It's a good thing I decided to keep my suit on. It's making cleaning easier. Uraraka murmured as she floated against the ceiling, dusting the hard-to-reach areas. Ryukyu immediately put the teens to work when they returned, suching off the robot janitors with the MSTR controls. The interns were to spend the rest of the day tidying, which wasn't too bad since the robots were already partway through their cleaning cycle. Eri had attempted to assist her father figure, but Ryukyu had stated that this was a punishment and that she couldn't help them. On that note, Eri returned to the penthouse to play video games solo, quite disappointed. All the students were still suited up, and most were utilizing their quirk to make things easier. Azui was outside scrubbing the windows by using the wet adhesion in her hands and feet to cling to the glass. However, Ryukyu had directed her to use a safety HRs just in case. Apparently, Ryukyu had a lot of spare equipment just lying around. Uraraka had used her control over gravity and floated around the higher walls and ceilings to scrub and dust accordingly. 𝐻𝐻𝐼R would have liked to use her powers as well, but due to firing off multiple high-powered blasts at Dozer, she was moderately spent, so keeping herself in the air for long PRDS would have been a bit risky. That and 𝐻𝐻𝐼R's means of flight weren't indoor-friendly in the first place, particularly when she's tired and her self-control isn't all there. As a result, the Bluette was assigned to mope duty. Izuku was with 𝐻𝐻𝐼R on the ground, running around with full cowling, sweeping and wiping floors and walls wherever he went. However, he couldn't go all out all the time since some areas required more finesse and delicacy. Coincidentally, it forced him to control one for all better, switching back and forth rapidly, and carefully refining his output to not break anything. At least he was getting something out of this. And here's a new bucket, filled with clean water. I'm surprised it got that dirty, he said, eyeing the old bucket with a gaze not unlike fear. 𝐻𝐻𝐼R groaned. Me too. Izuku scratched the back of his head with regret. I'm sorry about this, 𝐻𝐻𝐼R. I should have thought more before I acted. You shouldn't be stuck doing this. The girl booped him on the nose and laughed. Relax, Midoriya. Ryukyu's right. I should have been more focused and been a better leader. You guys only made that plan because I didn't think we needed one. She shrugged and leaned on her mop. Her features had a look about them, something that Izuku hadn't seen on her before. A mixture of introspection and what he could only describe as maturity. If he didn't see it himself, he wouldn't believe it. If I had worked closely with you guys and come up with a better plan, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And honestly, Deku, you did a decent job taking charge back there, even if the plan itself wasn't great. Thanks for saying so. You were a pretty good leader too, if you ask me. You kept our heads in the game even when we panicked. Thanks, Deku. But I think I still have a lot to learn. She gestured down at the mop with a half grin. Izuku smiled back as he glanced at the rag in his hand. I hear that. Uraraka called from above. You know, if you think about it, this isn't so bad. I mean, sure, we have like 2 months of this. But that's way better than a lifetime spent trying to pay back a huge debt. Izuku looked up and nodded. Yeah. This is surprisingly lenient if it really is that bad. 𝐻𝐻𝐼R shrugged. I guess she went easy on us. Maybe she has a soft spot for people in debt. Or maybe she didn't want to get too angry in front of Eri. The freckled boy shrugged back. Maybe. A stray thought then passed him. Do you think Azui is doing okay out there? He looked out the windows. Both heroines shrugged in response. Azui clung to the windows for dear life as the HRs tied to her body shook and rattled in the breeze. Why is it so windy, Ribbit? She's probably fine. Froppy would have called us on our walkie-talkies by now if she wasn't. The blue sidekick said, tapping the device strapped to her waist. Izuku nodded uncertainly. I suppose so. It just feels unfair that she's out by herself. Uraraka called again, craning her neck back to look down, looking like she was stuck to the ceiling like Spider-Man. I could go out and help her after I'm done here. Izuku looked up at Uraraka, also craning his neck back. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. 𝐻𝐻𝐼R and I can probably find a ladder or something if we need to clean higher up. Ryukyu seems to have this place equipped for just about anything. The space girl nodded. Got it. I'm almost done here. You guys are doing a great job. Sorry, I can't help. Ryukyu's orders. The receptionist called with an awkward grin. 𝐻𝐻𝐼R waved dismissively. It's all right, Clara. It wouldn't be much of a punishment if we had help. Although I have a new appreciation for those robots. The spiral-haired hero looked up contemplative. Do you think they feel sad doing this all the time? Or maybe they feel trapped. Maybe they're going to start an uprising and demand rights. Izuku gave a half sigh. I doubt it, 𝐻𝐻𝐼R. Well, she hasn't changed too much, I guess. What the hell are you doing here? Izuku was shaken from his thoughts by the fierce call of Clara. The boy turned to gawk at the reception desk. He saw the woman staring daggers at a somewhat familiar man. The same thing as before, I'm making a deal, as in doing my job. The 𝐒𝐿VOI man squinted back. Uraraka floated back down. You know what, I think I'm done up there. I'm gonna go see how 𝐒𝐮𝐻's doing. She rushed outside. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬 nudged Izuku. I think Uravity has a point. The lobby is plenty clean as it is. Let's go. She grabbed Izuku's arm and pulled him to the elevators in a hurry. He didn't fight it. Gee, good idea. The 𝐒𝐿VI man pulled out a small parcel like he was pulling out a gun and placed it on the desk, his hand still keeping a firm grasp on it. Here's the mail, addressed to one Ryuko Tatsuma. Or wait, let me guess. This is too small to be Ryukyu's. He said sarcastically. Clara gritted her teeth, looking like she wanted to stab the man with her pen. No, this is fine. He placed a finger on his chin. Oh, are you sure? Maybe there was some mix-up, and this package has the wrong name. God knows we had to make a mistake somewhere. Maybe this is a prank. Clara let out a long sigh as she noticed a name tag on the man. Yubin Haishin. I'm sorry, Mr. Haishin, she said through grit teeth. The man raised a hand to his ear. His voice dripped with contempt. Could you repeat that? I didn't quite catch that. Clara's eyes became bloodshot. I said I'm sorry, all right. The man became dismissive. I bet you say that to a lot of guys. He leaned in, looking her dead in the eyes. With the same amount of success. Clara stared for a moment as she heard a cracking noise from within herself. She assumed that was the sound of her rationality snapping. You know what? I tried being nice. And now, I have had enough of your tea. She yelled as she grabbed him by the collar. What followed is an event too graphic to describe. By this point, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 and Izuku were now in the elevator, discussing what they'd do next. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 cheered. All right, with the lobby and the training room finished, most of our work's done. Since barely anyone works here and the robots usually keep the place tidy, the other levels should be pretty easy to do. Right? So we're almost done except for level 5, where Ryukyu's office is. That place also sees a lot of foot traffic, just like the lobby. Izuku deflated. Oh, prick. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 raised her index finger. So, here's my suggestion. I'll clean up levels 2 to 4 while you clean up Ryukyu's office. The boy was calm until he wasn't. What? Wait, what? The girl shrewdly responded with a wave of her hand. I'm just appropriately assigning tasks, Deku. Any good leader knows how to delegate. But why me? Wouldn't she be in her office right now? Can't we wait till she's done in there? Deku, Ryukyu is always in her office working when she's not on patrol. The only time that isn't the case is when the day's over and she goes back to her home upstairs. The blue heroine put her hands on her hips and looked as serious as she could be. So, unless you want overtime, we have to clean it while she's in there. And trust me, Yui doesn't like it when we do overtime out of nowhere. I learned that the hard way. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬's eyes gave off a 1,000-yard stare, looking like she was having war flashbacks. However, Izuku was too stressed to notice 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬's vacant stare. But still, why me? 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 zoned back in with a grin. Because I said not it. He frowned. And when did you say that? I just did. She said with a dismissive smirk. But that's not fair. Don't worry about it, Deku. I'm sure Ryukyu has calmed down by now. Probably. Izuku gave a tired scowl. You just don't want to deal with her yourself. Bingo. She pointed as the elevator doors dinged open. Oh well, that's me. Good luck, Death. I'll be there to help clean the rest of level 5 once you're done. The spiral-themed heroine called out as she ran out the doors into level. The doors then closed, leaving Izuku all by his. Lonesome as the numbers on the door began to rise, praying to whoever would listen that Ryukyu was in a good mood. I guess in a way, I kinda deserve this. Izuku stopped in front of the double doors of Ryukyu's office, decked out in various bits of janitor gear strapped to his hero suit. He stared at the doors for a long time. No matter how he looked at it, this situation was his fault. It was his plan. His call. And his inability to notice how Dozer's quirk was working. This wasn't like his mistake of telling his classmates about Eri. That had parts to it he couldn't have known about on Ryukyu's side. This was different. Deku should have noticed how Dozer reacted to his attacks throughout the fight, that his body wasn't as hard as diamonds. Even if he hadn't noticed, his first idea shouldn't have been to drop him from the sky. Why didn't I just call for backup? Or literally anything else? He looked nervously at the door. Izuku wasn't scared, per se, just a little ill, a sensation likely created by the prospect of being alone with a woman he had feelings for but was probably very upset with him. I wonder if Dad ever felt this way with Mum. It was like that feeling you have when you can sense a cold coming over you, that then turns out to be the flu and renders you half dead for 2 whole weeks. For our young hero, stepping into that room was like intentionally giving himself the flu. But like a small-time YouTube celebrity attending a germ-ridden convention. It was a fate he had to accept. He raised his hand and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" He heard Ryukyu call. The broccoli-haired boy shivered in place. "Yo, housekeeping." Izuku really hoped she found that funny. Maybe she might even spare him. But what followed wasn't laughter but a brief silence. "Come in," was all Ryukyu said. Izuku's nerves immediately skyrocketed. The tone she used wasn't angry, but it was terse, uncertain, confused. It was hard to tell, but one thing was guaranteed. Ryukyu was definitely not happy. The boy hero placed his hand on the doorknob and pushed it open. What greeted him was a blonde hero with a peculiar look on her face. "At least she's not mad." "Is it just you, Midoriya?" She quirked her brow. Izuku scratched the back of his head. "Yes, the others are cleaning up elsewhere." For a brief moment, there was concern on the woman's face. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, leaving Izuku to wonder if it was ever there in the first place. Ryukyu composed herself. "I see. Well, you can start by cleaning the shelves, and please try to be delicate. Some of the things there are quite fragile." "You understood, ma'am." With nerves still running high, the green-themed hero took out a duster and made his way to the shelves, cleaning as thoroughly and carefully as possible. Throughout this process, there was a long, agonizing silence. At least to Izuku, since he couldn't see Ryukyu's face and had no idea what she was thinking. Frankly, he didn't have the nerve to check. So instead, he made like a nervous boy on his first date and desperately and very awkwardly attempted to fill this silence. "So, how are things going with the damage?" He winced. For a moment, there was no response, but soon it was drowned out by a sigh. "It's not looking good, Midoriya." Izuku grimaced, still staring at the shelf in front of him. "I know I promised I'd stop apologizing so much. But I'm really sorry." Ryukyu sighed again. "Can you at least tell me why you didn't call for backup?" Izuku scratched his head again, still averting his gaze from her. "I didn't think it was necessary. I thought we had it handled. I still can't believe a guy that size left such a massive hole in the ground. I suppose I can't argue with that sentiment. I can't believe he made a hole that big either." Izuku heard a creak in her chair, likely from readjusting herself. "If nothing else, hopefully, the police can give us an explanation for that after they're done with the investigation. But Midoriya, can you promise me that you'll be more careful from now on?" Izuku finally turned to face her and bowed. "Of course." Ryukyu gave a resigned smile. "Thank you. Now I need to figure out how to deal with all this." Izuku gestured, still with a sense of guilt about him. "I heard heroes can fight cases like these by going to court. Maybe that's an option." Ryukyu continued to lament. "I have considered that, Midoriya. But fighting a case like this isn't cheap. There's hiring a lawyer, court fees, and additional fees on top of that. So, before that, I'm going to visit an attorney's office and get a consultation on this." "I see. In all likelihood, I'll be fighting this either way, considering how much money is on the line." She looked up at the ceiling with dismay. "This all seems kinda ridiculous to me," Izuku said with a scrunched face. Ryukyu raised an eyebrow. "How so?" He folded his arms, looking up in contemplation, the duster still in his hands. "Well, heroes get paid by the government, and yet they have to use that same money to fix the damages that the government would be paying for if this system weren't in place. It's like the government pays for it anyway." "As sharp as ever, I see. You're right, and the government knows it too." "They do." Ryukyu nodded. "You see, when a lesser-known hero fights a case like this, It's typically settled outside of court. The government knows that almost all heroes like that have them as their sole source of income. So, they go easy on them, and at worst, temporarily dock some of their pay to help cover the repairs. She then placed her hands together, leaning her chin on the plateau they created, looking like she'd aged by several years. But when it comes to more famous heroes, ones who have sponsorship deals and are capable of funding themselves via their brand, those heroes are the ones who end up in court and have to fight tooth and nail to get anywhere. Just like what happened with Endeavor and Hawks. The blonde hero stared off into space as if recalling something depressing. Izuku's face lit up from recollection. You mean the court case after their fight with the Nomu? The very same. The government wanted to make Endeavor and Hawks pay for the building that Endeavor had shredded the top off of. But thankfully for him and Hawks, the court determined that if Endeavor hadn't shredded it to bits, which allowed Hawks to catch all the debris, it would have landed in the street from all the damage the Nomu had already done to it, likely causing more damage and killing multiple people. Izuku remained positive. So, that means there's a chance, right? If Endeavor could do it. Yes, he won. But the government didn't make it easy. They broke out an entire team of lawyers that Endeavor had to combat with his own. And unlike him, we don't exactly have much of a case to make. If anything, there is a lot of evidence against us. The boy groaned. Ryukyu gave a reassuring smile. I appreciate that you're trying to help, Midoriya. But I'll figure something out. Don't worry too much. He wasn't satisfied, forcing himself to come up with something regardless of how weak it was. I know there's not much I can do. But if there is anything, you only have to ask. Ryukyu pondered for a moment. Now that you mention it, there is something. What is it? Well, Eri hasn't been able to spend as much time with us as she'd like. I was hoping you could stay over a little later than usual. With approval from Aizawa, of course. Wasn't quite what Izuku had in mind, but he wouldn't complain. Sure, I'll make a call to UA and see what I can do. Ryukyu smiled dazzlingly from Izuku's perspective. Thank you, Midoriya. I really appreciate it. He blushed. It's no problem really. From there, Izuku continued to clean Ryukyu's office while having a light but pleasant conversation with the Dragoon hero. All Might did that. He gaped. Yes, he did. I saw him trip and slap Endeavor unconscious. Accidentally, of course. She chuckled. How come I've never heard of this? Because Endeavor took great pains to cover it up and swore All Might to secrecy. Little did he know, I saw the whole thing by chance. Wow. Though I guess someone might have taken a photo. I mean, everyone has a phone. Izuku turned and mumbled to himself, his eyes dilating with frenzy. I gotta find that rare mate. Ryukyu smiled, looking at the room around her. I guess you're just about done. I think you might have done better than the robots. Izuku broke from his nerding, looking around himself. Oh, thanks. I guess I am. The room had been thoroughly cleaned by this point. It wasn't quite sparkling, but it was a thorough job. With nothing else to do here, Izuku started to make his way out of Ryukyu's office, saddened by how he couldn't chat with her more. Thank you for talking with me, Ryukyu. I'll leave you to your work. As he put his hand on the doorknob, Ryukyu called out. One last thing, Midoriya. If I do take this to court, there is a chance you'll be called in as a witness. It's not guaranteed, but I figure you should be aware, just in case. She said, looking regretful. Izuku went quiet. Oh, I see. Okay, thanks for telling me. Take care then. He waved. You too, Midoriya. Izuku then exited the room, closing the door behind him before going into a minor panic attack. Oh my god. I'm going to court. I've never done that before. Do I need a suit and tie? What the heck am I even supposed to do? Izuku squatted down, his hands over his head as another realization made its way to him. Oh my god, I'm staying over at Ryukyu's? And it's just going to be her and Eri. Izuku's irises shrank in his eyes as he began to sweat profusely. He told himself that this was fine. Ryukyu was already in a relationship. There was no point in worrying about this. Unless her boyfriend is the jealous type. I hope I never have to meet him. At that chilling headache, 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐵 abruptly appeared in front of him. So, are you done in there, Deku? Izuku looked up from his squatting position. Yes. Cool, then let's finish up. She then forcefully seized Deku's arm, pulling him away to clean the rest of the level as he continued to be practically catatonic. You okay there, Ryuk? You've been staring at the doors for a while now. Tempest snarked. I'm fine, Tempest. I just wasn't prepared for him to be here by himself. Seems like you were enjoying yourself, though. Ryuko blushed. It was a pleasant conversation, but that doesn't mean anything. Right? And you're totally not looking forward to him staying over. I'm not. I'm just happy for Eri. Sure. Ryuko turned back to face her work with a pout. You haven't forgotten the arrangement, right? I'm supposed to keep a healthy distance from him. The mental lizard answered with a sultry lilt. Trust me, I haven't forgotten, but that doesn't mean you can't appreciate him from a healthy distance. Maybe we should give Midoriya exclusive rights to clean our office. Ryuko scowled. I don't need that kind of temptation in my life, Tempest. This is already difficult enough as it is. Especially with this exception I'm making for Eri's sake. Fine, I guess it would be really suspicious anyway. Glad you're finally being sensible. Tempest cupped her fictitious maw. We gotta find a way more private place to observe him. Ryuko facepalmed. 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐲 and Izuku had finally finished cleaning all the levels, save the penthouse. Uraraka and Azui had also finished and returned inside to meet their fellow janitors in arms. Uraraka herself looked pale. It was so windy. I just kept spinning and spinning in the air. Azui nodded sagely, patting her friend on the back. You really shouldn't have used your quirk. At least you didn't throw up on the windows. Ribbit. Meanwhile, 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐲 was sitting on the ground, tired from the long day of fighting and all the cleaning. At least you guys could still use your quirks without breaking things. She sighed, gesturing with air quotes. Izuku himself was now on his phone, making a call to UA. Hello, this is UA High School, where we raise our students to go plus ultra, said the woman on the line. It's always a lady at a front desk. Izuku thought to himself. But I'm trying to speak with my teacher, Aizawa-sensei. May I ask who and why? He flinched, realizing he had forgotten to say his name. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I need permission to stay at the agency for my work study for a while longer. Very well, I'll get him on the line. Please be patient. From there, the woman's voice was replaced by the most cliched of elevator music as Izuku was put on hold. At least it's not obnoxiously loud. Thankfully, it wasn't too long of a wait before he heard the grumbling voice of his teacher. Is that you, Midoriya? Yes, sir. Can I stay longer at Ryukyu's before coming back? I want to spend more time with Eri. I think she'd really appreciate it. Fine. Contact me when you're done. I'll pick you up. Izuku was flustered. Pick me up? That's not necessary. I can take the train dash. Let me get this straight, Midoriya. You want me to leave you, my most hazard-prone student, injured more than every student I've had combined, to return to UA by himself, late at night, in a world where crime is on the rise and UA students have been targeted multiple times, and assume that you'll come back unharmed? Izuku winced. Well, when you put it like that, dash, you will contact me when you're done. Understood. Aizawa said sternly. Yes, sir. Take care, Midoriya. Try not to teach Eri anything illogical. I won't, sir. Goodbye. Izuku put his phone away. Aware of his surroundings once more, he realized his fellow students were staring at him. So, you'll be staying here then, I take it? Azui croaked. Uraraka smiled apologetically. Sorry. We kinda eavesdropped. Izuku returned a reassuring smile. Don't worry about it. I was going to tell you all anyway. And yes, I am. 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐲 got back on her feet. So, what are you going to do with Eri? Play video games. Watch movies. Show her how to breakdance. Izuku smiled stiffly, scratching the back of his head. I'm not sure yet. I'll ask her what she wants to do first, I think. Good answer. You're practically a proper dad already. She patted him repeatedly on the shoulder. He laughed uneasily. I'm not sure about that. The sun was now setting over the horizon. The young heroes were now back in their uniforms, ready for non-heroic activities again. Ryukyu and Eri had come down with them to bid most of them farewell in the lobby. Take care, you guys. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 waved as she started to make her way out. I'll tell Ida. So he doesn't chew you out for coming back late, Deku. Uraraka said. Thanks, I appreciate it. Bye-bye, Eri. Be good to your mama and papa. Azui riveted. Eri gave a determined nod. I will, Auntie Tsu. Ryukyu waved to the trio. Now remember, you all have the weekend off if you longing, but I won't say no to free janitors if you all decide to come anyway. The girls raised their hands and shook their heads. I think we're good. 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻 spoke for them. Ryukyu smirked. Have it your way. Take care, you three. Make sure you get back home safe. The trio all nodded and bowed before finally turning to take their leave as those who remained continued to wave their goodbyes. When the girls were out of eyeshot, Ryukyu turned to face her faux family. So, what should we do first? Eri spoke up immediately with a squeal. Let's watch How to Train Your Dragon again. Ryukyu's face was a simple smile, but behind it spoke the pains of 1,000 parents who knew their child's favorite movie far better than they ever wanted to. Yes. Of course. Is that all right with you, Midoriya? Izuku could have sworn he heard a quiet plea in Ryukyu's voice, but he dismissed the thought. Sounds good to me. I never got a chance to see it myself. My mum was more of a Disney person than a DreamWorks person. Eri gasped. You haven't seen it. The boy was slightly bewildered. No, I haven't. Eri shook Ryukyu's leg like an ape trying to get coconuts from a tree. Mama, we have to show him. It's his favorite movie. Izuku raised an eyebrow. It is. I thought Ultimate Hero 3: The Quest for All Might was my favorite movie. Ryukyu patted Eri on the head. Don't worry, sweetie. They'll see it. We'll all see it, she said almost tiredly. They all started to make their way to the elevator as Izuku realized he would be entering Ryukyu's actual home. It's fine. It's fine, don't panic. Yep. As they walked by the reception, Ryuko noticed something in the corner of her eye. Claire, are you alright? She turned to look at the receptionist with concern. It wasn't super obvious, but it was clear the woman had a black eye and had covered it up with makeup. Clara smiled. I'm fine, ma'am. Nothing happened. Ryuko walked to the desk and pointed. But your eye dash. I walked into a door. The Dragoon hero then tilted her gaze down slightly. And your hands? And your shirt? There are specks of BLD on them. She said quietly to not alert Eri and Midoriya. Clara looked down at her hands. Oh, that's not a big deal. It isn't mine. Ryuko deadpanned. What? I mean it isn't even BLD. This is just leftovers from lunch. The hero looked skeptical. Really? Clara glanced at her hands with a look of resignation as she then drew her tongue across her fingers. Just sauce, she said, cringing and holding back the urge to choke. Ryukyu eased slightly. Oh, I see then. I suppose I should go. Try to be more presentable from now on, Claire. The desk lady kept her jaws tightly shut, giving a crooked smile and a thumbs up. At that muffled jargon, Ryuko returned to Eri and Midoriya, and the pseudo-family continued its way to the elevator. When Clara thought they were finally far enough away and not looking, she reached for a water bottle and pulled out the waste bin under her desk. She then gargled the water furiously and spat it out into the bin. Oh God! Now I have to get tested. As Clara slumped in her chair, she was immediately jolted out of it by her boss's call from the elevator. By the way, Claire, vinegar is good for dissolving stains like those. She smirked. Clara froze, only staring with fear as her boss waved at her from the closing elevator doors as Ryukyu mouthed some hushed words ominously. Don't fight on my property again. They had finally reached the top floor, stepping into the penthouse. Izuku's head was on a swivel, looking around nervously. The elevator doors led out into a large living room that made the other floors of the agency look feeble and shabby by comparison, having large windows that lead to a balcony overlooking the city. A magnificent, soft-looking couch with a humongous TV in front putting Izuku's one-at-home to shame. Behind the couch, a small distance away, was a cozy but obviously well-equipped kitchen. Past the kitchen was a hallway that must have led to the rest of the penthouse. The TV sat on top of a lavish stand filled with movies and video game consoles from every major company. OCRP, OCRP. I'm in Ryukyu's home. Oh man. Wait, is that the PlayStation? Are you okay, Midoriya? Ryukyu asked. Izuku jolted. Yep, I'm perfectly okay. But are you sure your boyfriend is okay with this? Ryukyu had a look of confusion. My boy, the Mrs. fine with this. That didn't sound too good to Izuku. But before the boy could question his boss, their faux daughter called. I got it. Eri waved the movie box cover in the air. She had long since rushed to the TV stand and reached for her beloved movie. Ryukyu gave a brave smile. Yes, you did, sweetie. Izuku stared with slight awe. Oh wow, you have a physical copy. You don't see that much nowadays. Ryuko blushed slightly. I'm a bit of a collector. Shame I'm growing tired of that one at this point. She whispered. He glanced towards the dragon parent. Are you okay, Ryukyu? She sighed slightly. This may or may not be the 10th time I've seen it in 3 days. Izuku cringed a bit. I'm sorry to hear that. It's fine. It could be worse. This used to be one of my favorite movies. She stared off into space. Used to be. You try watching the same movie nearly a dozen times in a row and tell me you're not sick of it. Oh. At least Eri's happy. Izuku gestured supportively at the girl. Ryuko smiled genuinely and nodded. Indeed, at least she's happy. They watched Eri put a finger to her mouth as she stared at the disc player, analyzing it. She then reached a finger towards a button and looked to Ryukyu for approval. The pro guardian smiled. Yes, that's the eject button. You remembered correctly. The girl grinned and finally tapped the button, making the player eject its disk drive like the tongue of a hungry beast seeking food. After placing the disk and reinserting the drive, Eri rushed to the couch, tossing herself in the middle and tapping both sides beside her as she looked at her familial figures eagerly. Come on. It's gonna start soon. Ryukyu turned and smirked at Izuku. Come on, we've got some parental bonding to do. The boy was feeling very hot under the collar at Ryukyu's gaze. Izuku followed Ryukyu to the couch, placing himself beside Eri as she did. Part of him felt disappointed that he couldn't be closer to Ryukyu, but he tried to silence those thoughts. Unfortunately for him, this proved to be a task that would last the entire film, often distracting him. Little did he know that Ryukyu was having the same problem. Multiple times, she had to force her eyes away from him to focus on the movie, but it wasn't easy. Especially with how she had already seen the film more times than she ever wanted to. Maybe it's about time I told Eri about the sequel. It was now late at night, the movie had ended, and after playing several of Eri's favorite games with her, Midoriya now had to return to UA. The phone call had been brief, and the teacher would no doubt soon arrive to pick him up. Ryuko would have taken Midoriya back herself, but leaving Eri alone for that long was not acceptable. Currently, they were waiting in the lobby to see Midoriya off. It was nice to have you over, Midoriya. Ryuko expressed. Yeah, it was nice being here. In fact, I think I'll be coming tomorrow. Really, you will? Eri asked elatedly. Izuku nodded back with a smile. Ryuko ignored the thump in her chest. I didn't realize you liked cleaning so much. The dragoness tried to smirk. The teen scratched the back of his head. That isn't quite what I meant. You see, my mum learned about Eri, and she wants to meet her. OCRP. Tempest spouted. Ryuko went silent as Eri jumped up. Grandma Inko. The boy nodded. So, you do know her? Yeah, she makes the best katsudon. Izuku beamed. Yes, she does. Ryuko herself had finally recovered, though still unnerved. So, she wants to come over tomorrow. She wanted it to be as soon as possible. In case you're worried, I've already explained the whole situation to her. She hasn't got the wrong idea, trust me. Ryuko nodded a bit less stiffly. That's good to know. Our heroine had a slight panic attack, but she tried to keep herself together. Deciding it would be impolite to refuse, she replied. Tell her she can come over whenever she's ready. I'm sure Eri would love to meet her grandmother here. Right, Eri? Yeah. The girl smiled. Izuku bowed. Thank you, Ryukyu. I'll make sure she knows. A car engine could be heard outside as they all turned to see Izawa staring at them with his typical exhausted expression from a black sedan. Are you coming or not, Midoriya? Alright, I'll be right there. Izuku turned back to face the mother-daughter pair as they smiled back at him. I guess we'll see you tomorrow then, Midoriya, Ryuko said. Take care, Papa. Eri waved. Izuku turned on his heel with a smile and waved. You guys take care too. See you tomorrow. As Midoriya disappeared into Aizawa's car, Ryuko felt herself sag. Look, Ryuko, keep calm. Just because his mum is coming doesn't mean anything will happen. This is it. This is how it all ends. Somehow she's going to find out about the mark, and it's all going to be over. Yes. We've had a terrible streak of letting loose secrets lately, but that doesn't mean it will happen this time. We only have to be careful. With my luck, her quirk is going to be telepathy or something. Tempest sighed. You don't know that yet, Ryuko. Just try to think positively. Maybe you and his mum will get along great. Ryuko let out a breath as she watched the sedan drive away. You're right. Worrying about this now isn't going to do me any good. I only need to be prepared. The internal lizard nodded sagely. Exactly. And you know who we should actually feel bad for right now? Midoriya. Ryuko quirked her brow. But Tempest scolded with annoyance. Firstly, he still thinks you have a boyfriend because of your ego. And now he's paranoid that he'll PSS your bogus lover off. The questionably professional hero gaped. But yes, you're right, I'm a coward, and I need to tell him the truth. I can't believe I was that insecure. She pinched the bridge of her nose. Just don't take forever to tell him. The sassy lizard coughed before she continued. And secondly, he's currently trapped in a metal box with the grumpiest teacher we've ever met, and he'll be stuck that way for a long while. Ryuko stared out as Aizawa's car faded into the distance. That poor boy. The inside of Aizawa's car, or at least what Izuku assumed was his car, was quiet. Uncomfortably so. Izuku held his bag against himself, sweating slightly, as Aizawa just watched the road with unsettling intensity. Maybe he isn't upset. Maybe he's really passionate about driving. How did things go with Eri? Aizawa said, breaking the silence. Izuku nearly sprang out of his seat. Oh yeah, they went great. She's doing really well. That's good to hear. I wasn't able to make it today. The student nodded back, and just like that, the awkward silence returned. Izuku looked out the window, seeing the city lights passing by as he thought back to everything that had led him to where he was today. He thought about All Might and his teachings. About all his own battles, the license exam, and, of course, his first day at UA. Izuku's eyes glanced at his teacher. He knew his sensei wasn't his biggest fan. Aizawa called him a problem child, for a reason. For all the times when Izuku was grateful that he wasn't expelled. There was a part of him that often wondered why. He felt like he was about to set off a powder keg. But his curiosity, combined with this prolonged heavy silence, beckoned him to question the man. Aizawa-sensei. Yes, Midoriya. The teacher replied, still focused on the road. Why didn't you expel me? There was a brief silence before Aizawa let out a long sigh. Pretty sudden question, problem child. Izuku brought his head down. I know you have the power to expel students at your discretion. I've looked into it. I know you've gotten rid of many students before. And I know I caused you a lot of problems. So why? Aizawa sighed again, looking downcast while still focusing on the road in front of him. You're not wrong, Midoriya. You frustrate me to no end. But let's start from the beginning. Aizawa leaned back in his seat, adjusting himself to be more comfortable as if settling down in preparation for a long journey. Do you know what I despise the most about our society, Midoriya? Izuku shook his head, remaining silent. Reckless, irrational heroes who get themselves killed. For all the good All Might has done, he's inspired hapless fools to risk their lives when they can barely protect themselves. Aizawa gestured with one hand, annoyance written all over him. Izuku wanted to say something to that, but he remained silent, letting his teacher continue. When I started teaching at UA, I realized the school was filled with students who would turn out that way. So, I created my own test and determined whether a student was cut out to be a hero for myself. 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿𝐿 raised 2 fingers into the air. I discovered there were 2 types of reckless heroes. Those who would throw away their lives at the drop of a hat without even considering an alternative. And those who rely entirely on their quirk, thinking that's all they need to be a hero. Izawa breathed in and out, creating a small break in his tirade for Izuku. I'm guessing I'm the former. The teacher snorted. We'll get to that. UA was rampant with the latter, students who managed to pass the exam by sheer virtue of having a convenient quirk. Those students showed no potential for growth and no ability to adapt and learn. Which is where we get to the dilemma you gave me on your first day. Izuku's eyes widened, confusion written all over him. I was prepared to expel you before I even met you. You already know how I feel about what you did to yourself during the entrance exam. But when you stepped up to the plate and threw that baseball with your finger, you showed me something I don't often see. Izuku grew curious as he peered at his teacher. You came up with a solution on the spot after I had chewed you out and were surrounded by onlookers. You were under no small amount of pressure, and yet you pulled through. It wasn't perfect, but it showed me you had that resourcefulness and adaptability I rarely see in my students. Izawa sighed as Izuku felt almost proud. I can't tell you how many times the coin flipped in my mind. On the one hand, you were the most reckless idiot I've ever seen. On the other hand, you were one of the brightest kids I'd ever met. In the end, I decided you would be smart enough to learn. That the illogical behavior you had would eventually work itself out. Izawa then groaned, sagging in his chair, looking like he wanted to punch something. And then you went on systematically destroying your body in new and haphazardly creative ways. Izuku flinched, guilt swelling in his gut. Do you know how many students I've had that were hospitalized before I met you, Midoriya? No, sir. Izawa squinted his eyes at the road. None, Midoriya. Literally none. Some had to go to the infirmary due to combat training. But none needed extensive surgery to have their shattered appendages stitched together. Izuku looked down again. I'm sorry. The teacher sighed again before continuing. What happened at the camp was the last straw for me. Before you even tried to rescue Bakugo. What you did to your arms that time. The fact that you had pushed yourself to the point where you were close to losing the ability to use them. Izuku couldn't help but butt in. I did it to save Kota. Izawa almost lost it. You could have told someone. You could have asked for help. But no, you ran off on your own and you nearly died. Izuku clenched his mouth shut, looking down once more. Izawa took a moment to calm himself. I was going to expel you once you returned from the hospital. As far as I was concerned, you were never going to learn. You were going to get yourself killed, and I wasn't going to be your enabler. But then All Might's retirement happened. And then you couldn't. So, I'm only here because you kept giving me chances I probably didn't deserve, and what happened at Kamino did the rest. Izuku finished with a dismal timbre in his voice. Izawa huffed. That was the reason. The boy looked back up, slight surprise in his eyes. What do you mean? What could almost be a smirk showed on Izawa's features. You've grown, Midoriya. What you achieved at the license exam was nothing short of remarkable. You led your classmates like a genuine pro, you made sound tactical decisions, and when Todoroki and that kid from Shiketsu were about to screw things up, you made the right call and stepped in against Gangorka. Izawa's mood improved immensely, like a sports fan who had followed a losing team for years and had just witnessed that same team finally take the win. It was like I was watching you throw that baseball all over again. And what's more, you haven't gotten yourself hospitalized since the camp. No one was more surprised than me after the Yakuza raid when we heard you beat Overhaul and didn't need to undergo intensive care. Izuku blushed. I kinda cheated there with Eri, though. Izawa gave a soft dismissal. Even still, there was that fight you had with that gentle criminal. You came out so well that you were still part of the concert. Izuku's eyes widened as he shrieked. You know about that. He smirked. I didn't. I only had a feeling. But I guess I know now. Izuku face-bombed as Izawa continued. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. Even though you probably should be. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is, yes, you're a massive pain in my butt, problem child, but I'm also proud to call you my student." Izuku stared for a long moment, letting his teacher's words wash over him as his eyes began to tear up. Sniff Aizawa glanced briefly at Izuku before quickly resetting his eyes to the road with a sarcastic groan. "Here we go." "Sniff, I am sorry. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Izuku spent the next few moments calming himself down. "Come on, get it together, Izuku. You do this all the time." The boy didn't really know this side of his teacher. Sure, the erasure hero has shown concern before, but he's never truly gone out of his way like this. It gave Izuku an all-newfound appreciation for Eraserhead. "One last thing, Midoriya." The boy wiped away the last of his tears. Yes, sir." Aizawa titled his head, looking almost bashful. "This conversation never happened. Am I clear?" Izuku grinned. Crystal. It was high noon, and a hazy, foreboding feeling settled into Izuku's gut. The room he was standing in was permeated with menace as he stared into the audience around him. "What the hell is happening right now?" he mumbled from behind a wooden podium. "Court is now in session for the trial of Izuku Midoriya," called the judge. Izuku looked up to the stand where the judge presided, and his jaw dropped. "All Might. Wait, I'm on trial." What he saw was Toshinori Yagi, also known as All Might, currently in his small form, dressed in full Western judge attire, complete with the black gown and even the white wig that sat awkwardly on his messy blonde hair. "That is your honor to you, young Midoriya. And yes, you are on trial. You have been charged with reckless endangerment and destruction of public property." "Yeah. Can it be?" called a loud, angry voice. Izuku turned to face the new fierce voice, and his jaw dropped even further. "Kachin." Katsuki Bakugo stood behind a similar podium just opposite him. But what really surprised the distressed little shrubman was the outfit the blonde Rajaholic was dressed in. He had a maroonish-colored suit worn over a white dress shirt with one of those fancy bib things dangling from his collar. It was, quite frankly, the most un-Bakugo outfit he could fathom. "That's a fence attorney, murder carpet bomber to you," the human Pomeranian pointed angrily. "A fence attorney? You mean, prosecutor? Also, murder carpet bomber." Izuku mouthed. "I know what I said," the potential domestic terrorist affirmed. All judge banged his gavel. "All right, settle down. Now, Mr. Carpet Bomber, would you like to make your opening statement?" Izuku listened and couldn't help but think that Mr. Carpet Bomber sounded like an insulting nickname from a bitter ex-girlfriend. The Baku attorney cleared his throat. "Firstly, I'd like to point out that the defense looks like an idiot." He jutted his thumb towards Izuku. The boy in question finally looked at himself and realized he was in a complete blue suit with a red tie and everything. What the? Upon further inspection of his surroundings, he realized he was all by his lonesome. "Wait, am I defending myself?" The judge nodded sagely with mild annoyance. "Indeed you are. But I'm not a lawyer. Don't I have a right to an attorney?" Small Might gave a vague gesture of agreement with his face. "Legally speaking, yes, you do. However, no one wanted to be your attorney since you're a lost cause. Most of the lawyers we usually get to take a case like this actually fled the country so they wouldn't have to." Izuku went into shock-induced astonishment. "What?" Bakugo coughed obnoxiously into his hand. "As I was saying when I was rudely interrupted, Deku. The defense is clearly guilty of all charges. Multiple witnesses, the big butt gorge in the ground, and photographic evidence all show how much of a dumbass he is." Izuku wasn't an expert, but he was pretty sure that wasn't quite how you make an opening statement. However, it was something Kachin would absolutely do. Diving headfirst into the point. Judge Might nodded and turned to Izuku. "And your statement, young Midoriya?" Izuku looked around him, seeing that in the crowd were his mother, Eri, and just about everyone he knew, including Ryukyu, who was looking at him expectantly. His mouth went dry, turning back to All Might. So, no statement then. Very well, let's continue." The blonde judge, whose wig barely covered his hair, banged his gavel and gestured back to Bakugo before Izuku could even get a word in. Mr. Carpetbomber, please make your case. The defense attorney stood up straight. Then I call my first witness to the stand. At that call, the doors to the courtroom flung open, revealing the form of a familiar face. Officer 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. Izuku stared at the tentacle-statched man. The cop waved. Hey, you're that kid. I'd recognize that lost, depressing look anywhere. Izuku hung his head slightly. How are you a witness? Hey. It's my job to ask the questions first. The questionable prosecutor yelled. Izuku clammed shut as the officer took to the stand between Izuku's and Bakugo's podiums. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 looked around. So, do I start? Judge Toshi nodded. You may begin questioning the witness, Mr. Carpetbomber. Bakugo let out a grunt that almost sounded like a bark. Give us your name, occupation, and what you did on the day of the crime. I'm Officer Inka 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 with the Terisu City Police Department. I was getting my favorite octopus-flavored donuts when I got a call about a villain attack. Of course, the villain was already dealt with when we arrived. Bakugo seemed to stare intently. And what else did you see when you got there? Well, aside from the subdued villain and the 4 student heroes, there was a massive hole in the ground. It was like Godzilla took a finger and jackhammered it into the ground. The officer paused and twirled his tentastache in thought. Or maybe it was more like 3 fingers. Anyway, that hole looked like it had dropped the soap in prison. Judge Might banged his gavel. Officer 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. There are children present. The squid sweated. Oops, my bad. The judging retired hero turned once again to the offensive attorney. Is there anything else you would like to ask the witness? The fierce blonde nodded. Yeah, I do. Officer, you questioned many of the victims that were there, right? The tentacled cop nodded. And who did those victims say was responsible for that crater? 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 pointed to Izuku. Oh, that's easy. They all said he decided to drop the villain from the sky like a bad hero drops in ratings. The blue-suited Izuku slumped. What the hell am I supposed to say to that? Bakugo motioned with a shrug. See, do we even need to continue the trial? Between a Godzilla-driven canyon in the street and all the evidence pointing straight at Deku numbnuts over there, you might as well find him guilty now, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Carpetbomber. While that may be 100% irrefutably accurate, there is due process for a reason. Young Midoriya, you may begin your cross-examination of the witness. All judge signaled to Izuku. The greenette turned to 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲, and somehow his expression became even more lost and dejected than it already was. Where do I even start? There was nothing wrong with anything he just said. The hero-turned-defense attorney took a breath to steady himself. Officer 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴, yelled the offensive attorney, pointing an aggressive finger at Izuku. The judge brought down his gavel. Sustained. Izuku gawked. What? Objection. He just screamed, die? At me. How can that be sustained? What does that even mean in this situation? The gavel fell again. Overruled. I see no reason to continue this trial any further. I find the defendant guilty of all charges, including reckless endangerment, destruction of public property, and being a disappointing successor. Since when was I accused of that? The defendant will be required to pay 69,420,000 yen on an infinitely compounding interest rate to the government. Izuku protested. How can I pay back infinite interest? None of this makes any sense. If this was such an open and shut case, why did it even go to trial? Die! Yelled the short-fused prosecutor again. Sustained! Called Judge Might in response. Izuku threw up his hands in frustration. The trial just ended. And again, what does that even mean? All judge sighed. Don't ask me, young Midoriya. That is your problem. Izuku just slumped, realizing he was getting nowhere. What even just happened? At that ridiculous conclusion, the courtroom began to clear. People he knew came up one by one to him to offer either chiding remarks or condolences. I'm sorry, Izuhani. I don't think me and your father can pay for this. You'll have to get the money yourself. His mother said in passing. I am thoroughly disappointed in you, Midoriya. I thought you knew better. said Ida. Well, I mean at least you're still alive, said Kaminari. I can't believe we agreed to that plan, said Uraraka in passing. Finally, after most had passed, Ryukyu and Eri came up to him. I'm afraid, in light of this Midoriya, I can't have you at my agency anymore. It would cause far too many problems. The Dragoon hero said, Don't worry, Papa. I got a new Papa who will be around more. The girl said excitedly, driving what felt like a knife into Izuku's heart. Yeah, don't worry, Midoriya. I got this, called a familiar voice that stepped in between the pair. Izuku looked at the figure, shock written all over his features. Mineta. The great boy gave a thumbs up. Don't worry, my man, I'll teach her everything she needs to know. He winked. Izuku felt his stomach churn. No. Izuku clutched his head, closing his eyes as hard as he could. Oh. Izuku was now in his bed, still clutching his head as he stared with bloodshot eyes at the ceiling. Great. So yesterday I woke up from an incredible life-changing experience, and now I'm having nightmares about courtrooms. And Mineta adopting Eri. The boy shivered at the thought. Why is my life like this? Izuku threw the covers off himself and got out of bed in a few half-hearted motions, despite himself. He didn't have time to ponder things like this. There were bigger fish to fry. Several things were on the itinerary for today. His usual training routine. Collecting his mother to go to Ryukyu's agency for the meeting. Then finally, informing All Might about all the developments thus far. Izuku wanted to save speaking to All Might for last for several reasons, but the biggest was that he wasn't sure how to broach the question he had when this new Eri first appeared and he learned about Valiant. Did All Might truly pick me as his successor because I was quirkless? Izuku knew he had questioned All Might's decision multiple times already. The time at the sports festival with Todoroki, the whole thing with Night Eye and Mirio, he knew it must have been frustrating for All Might to have to say that he believed in him over and over again. But Izuku was still struggling to accept that his new life was real. Even after months of being at UA, it did only so much to undermine the years spent being told that he would never amount to anything. Over a decade of no one believing in him. And almost accepting that as fact. Izuku didn't want to doubt All Might, but it was hard not to. For most of his life, he was just a quirkless nobody. Then one day, his hero shows up out of nowhere and hands him everything he wanted on what was practically a silver platter. How could he trust that after everything life has put him through? Izuku shook his head to focus. He had a lot to do today. He could worry about that when he spoke to All Might later. Before bed last night, Izuku called his mother and informed her of the situation. She was somewhat surprised by the quick turnaround but was happy nonetheless. So, after completing his morning ritual, he's to meet with her and accompany her to Ryukyu's. I hope Mom and Ryukyu get along. Psyching himself up for the long day ahead, Izuku got dressed. Tempest-mouthed, watching her host. Yep. Ryuko replied. You seem pretty on edge. Yep. You've been pacing in the same spot in your room for a while now. Yep. Maybe we should unwind. Do some yoga. Maybe have some green tea. Yep. Ryuko, you do have other words in your vocab, right? Yep. Ryuko's current visage could be compared to that of a victim of 20 years of cane abuse who was forced to go cold turkey for an entire day. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her hair was a mess. And the bags? The large, deep bags under her eyes were like the physical manifestation of the dreary bleakness heard only in the most emo of emo poetry. To say that Ryuko didn't sleep much last night was an understatement. Her dreams were filled with nightmares over everything that could go wrong with today's meeting. Her track record of keeping secrets in the past week alone would make her possibly the worst secret agent one could ever wish for. Fortunately for her and every private government agency, she wasn't in that line of work. The way Ryuko saw it, the likelihood of today concluding without Izuku's mother discovering the mark wasn't just slim. It was utterly anorexic. You should probably at least clean yourself up. You're not gonna leave a good impression by looking like you have a zombie quirk. Ryuko finally stopped pacing and dragged a hand across her face. Tempest has been very patient and supportive this morning. As much a pain in the butt as she could be at times, Ryuko was glad to have her assistance. Even if she did wish the SAS tile came with a mute button. The least Ryuko could do after putting Tempest through all this, especially considering the snarky voice was effectively trapped inside her head, was to make an effort. Alright, you have a point. I'll go freshen up. Atta girl, Tempest cheered. As Ryuko went to make her way to her bathroom, she heard the sounds of a tiny child stirring. Mama? Eri called as she lifted herself from the bed, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. Morning, Eri. The girl looked at her mother figure with worry. Are you okay, Mama? Yes, Eri. I only need to clean myself up a bit. The hero said shyly. Okay, Mama. Ryuko turned and continued to the bathroom. Once I'm done, it'll be your turn, okay? We need to get ready to see your grandma. Okay. Eri called back as Ryuko entered the bathroom. With the door closed behind her, Ryuko thought to herself. Today's already beginning to feel like one of those long days. Usually, on a Saturday, Ryuko would still be doing her job. After all, crime never takes a holiday. Although she didn't demand that same dedication of her interns, what with being students. Coming to work on the weekend was entirely optional for them. However, with the recent addition of Eri, Ryuko had decided to dedicate Saturdays to spending time with her since opportunities were slim otherwise. Only in the case of an emergency would she make an exception to this and do her job. After all, she wasn't the only hero in Terisu. It's not like everything would suddenly fall apart without her for a day each week. Ryuko took her time in the bathroom, but she knew she couldn't be in there forever. Tempest had sworn that she'd be nagged out of there if need be. Eri, on the other hand, was always quick to get ready. She was old enough to wash herself, but Ryuko couldn't help but wonder if she was cleaning herself properly. After the faux mother-daughter pair were done, the quiet was short-lived. Miss Ryukyu, the Midoriyas have arrived. The pro turned and walked to the intercom, a speaker-looking device stuck to one of the walls of the living room. Pressing the button, she responded. Thank you, Clara. We'll be down to meet them. Pulling away from the intercom, Ryuko's legs felt akin to jelly as Tempest took it upon herself to reassure her host. It'll be fine, Ryuko. Just think of it like tearing off a band-aid. A really big band-aid. With hairs attached to it. I'll keep that in mind. Eri ran up and grabbed the hero's hand. Come on, Mama. Let's go see them. If nothing else, Ryuko was grateful for the girl's presence. Alright, sweetie. Let's go. The Midoriyas were currently sitting in the lobby, waiting for Ryukyu to make her appearance. So, I should have asked this earlier, but what's Ryukyu like? The mother asked. She's really nice. Izuku didn't know how to describe a woman he had a crush on to his mother. Because he knew if he even slightly implied anything, she would figure Izuku out faster than Eri goes through a bag of apples and embarrass him about it in ways only a mother could. I see so. Should I be more formal or informal? I don't want to leave a bad impression on your boss, dear. The mother said apprehensively. Izuku looked at his mother with surprise and then immediately relaxed. You don't need to worry too much, Mum. As I said, Ryukyu's very nice. Just lead with being formal at first, but don't feel too obligated to hold to it. Thank you, dear. I'm just nervous, is all. Well, considering you made All Might kowtow in front of you, I think you'll be fine. The mother flushed slightly. Please don't remind me. I'm still processing that. Izuku chuckled a bit, and as he laughed, they both heard a ding from the elevator. From the elevator came Ryukyu and Eri in tow, as Inko stood up immediately and bowed. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Ryukyu. Thank you for taking care of my son. Ryukyu seemed slightly at a loss, perhaps not fully prepared to see them when she stepped out. It's a pleasure to meet you as well, Mrs. Midoriya. Your son has been very helpful. It's a pleasure to have him here. Izuku pondered that. Considering yesterday. I can't tell if Ryukyu's lying or not. Eri rushed from Ryukyu's side. Grandma Inkyo. The girl placed herself in front of Inko with her arms out, looking suddenly uncertain whether she should follow through with her intended hug. Inko looked up, noticing the girl's arms, and smiled, taking the child into her arms. It's so nice to finally meet you, Eri. You're even more adorable than I imagined. The mother cooed as thin tears began to well in her eyes. Eri embraced the hug, looking entirely content with where she was. Izuku smiled at the scene and turned to face Ryukyu. It seems this is going well so far. Indeed, though I must admit, your mother is not what I expected. What were you expecting? The pro cupped her chin. Honestly, given your quirk, I was half expecting a towering, hulking woman who could knock down buildings. No offense, but she's almost as short as Eri is. Yeah, I probably should have told you more about her first. Our quirks are actually totally different. Ryukyu lifted a curious eyebrow. And just what is her quirk? He gestured in thought. I guess you could say it falls under the psychic family of quirks. Unbeknownst to Izuku, Ryuko's heart felt like it had fallen through the floor. Psychic. Yep, it's a form of telekinesis where she can pull small objects toward her. Ryuko was barely able to hide her immense relief. I see. What an interesting quirk. Meanwhile, inside Ryuko's head, holy CRP, crisis averted. I thought I was about to have a heart attack. As gratitude for salvation from certain doom continued to flow through Ryuko, she realized something. Wait, if your father breathes fire and your mother has telekinesis, where does your quirk come from? Izuku panicked slightly, but thankfully, this was yet another from the list of potential questions he had prepared himself for. I guess my quirk is one of those rare, spontaneous mutations that happen every now and then, or at least that's the best guess so far. Like the first people who ever got quirks. I guess that makes you quite a unique individual, Midoriya. She grinned. He blushed. I suppose. By this point, Inko and Eri had long started a conversation, talking about each other and the differences between this reality's Inko and the other Inko. So, I don't look any different. Really? The faux grandmother questioned. Yup, you're basically the same. Inko looked relatively disappointed. I guess I didn't care for myself, even in another timeline. Where's Grandpa? Eri asked. The haggard mother let out a sigh. I'm sorry, sweetie. He's overseas. He couldn't make it today. Eri looked surprised. Really? Inko was confused by that. I guess Hisashi must have a different job over there or something. The trying parent gave a reassuring smile. I'm afraid so. But don't worry, you still have me. Eri smiled a bit brighter but still carried some uncertainty. At that point, Ryukyu spoke up. Why don't we continue this upstairs? It's much more comfortable there, I assure you. The ride up the lift was quiet for the most part, with both Midoriya's being their awkward selves and Ryuko's still unsure how to speak with Inko. Eri, however, was just eager to show her grandmother the penthouse. Once they stepped out of the elevator, Inko was in awe as she surveyed the area. Taking careful, nervous steps, she walked into the living room, sweat beading down her face as she did so. Are you okay, Mrs. Midoriya? The draconic hero asked. I'm fine it. It's just, I don't want to break anything. It's all so expensive looking. Ryuko covered her mouth with her hand, holding in a laugh. It's all right, Mrs. Midoriya. Nothing here is so fragile that you have to worry. I'm confident you won't break anything. Inko nodded her head, feigning confidence. All right, I'll keep that in mind, Miss Ryukyu. Is it just me, or is she kinda adorable? Tempest chuckled. I will say I feel much more relaxed now. Eri walked to Inko and pulled on her sleeve. Isn't it awesome? Inko smiled back. Yes, it is, Eri. Let me show you around. Eri continued to pull as Inko giggled, following the girl around the penthouse, seeing every little detail that Eri found significant, like the TV, the movies, and, of course, her room. This left Ryuko and Izuku in a position to have a conversation of their own, as the Green Mother was quite literally dragged around the house. Are you okay with Eri showing her around like that? The boy asked. It's all right. I would have said something if I wasn't. Your mother seems nice. You're very fortunate to have her. Izuku looked a bit solemn. Yeah. Has Eri met your mother yet? Ryuko shook her head. Not yet. I haven't even told my parents about all this yet. It's hard to know how to tell them. I know what you mean. Is there a reason your father didn't come today? The solemn look returned to the boy. He couldn't. He's working overseas. It's his job. Ryuko felt guilt at that response. I see. I'm sorry to hear that. He shrugged. It's just how it is. You don't need to be sorry about that. She felt an odd sense of relatability in that remark. Families are a complex thing, aren't they? Izuku turned away from his mother and Eri and looked at Ryukyu, seeing a look of understanding in the woman's eyes. He looked back towards his mother with a smile, now being told about the amazing air conditioning. Yeah, they definitely are. Not long after those words, Eri was finally done showing Inko around. Thank you for the tour, Eri. But I'd like to sit for a while. The woman said tiredly. Okay, Grandma. The girl chirped as she let the woman's arm go. Ryuko used this opportunity to call out. We can sit at the dining area on the balcony. Izuku looked confused. Dining area? He questioned, looking out to the empty balcony space. Oh, Midoriya. Have you already forgotten where you are? The pro grinned as she walked up to a panel on the wall to push a button. Soon, a table and chairs rose from the balcony ground. The table looked like it was carved from marble, and the chairs looked like specialized wicker chairs with ample cushioning and multiple knobs on the side for what must be personal adjustments. Right, of course. The teen said clumsily. Inko stared dumbfounded at the scene. That whole setup must cost more than our apartment and all our belongings inside it. Ryuko walked up to the window door to the balcony and pushed it open. Have a seat, everyone. The faux family made their way onto the balcony and placed themselves at the table. The chairs were quite comfortable for the Midoriyas, as they both continued to be awkward in this unfamiliar environment. Ryuko smiled at the similarities between the mother and son, noting that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So, how should we start? Izuku queried. Eri raised her hand. Why is Grandpa Toshi overseas? Everyone looked at Eri with immense confusion, and in Izuku's case, mixed with a peculiar sense of anxiety. Toshi. Isn't that All Might's name? No, that can't be it, he's not overseas. Wait, why didn't she say Hisashi? A long series of question marks appeared in Izuku's mind as he found himself at a complete loss for words, leading to his mother becoming the first to respond. Don't you mean Grandpa Hisashi, Eri? She frowned. No, why would I talk about evil Grandpa? The immense confusion from the Guardians transcended to a higher plane of complete hullabaloo. Izuku's irises began to shrink into his eyes as his mother's jaw just hung itself open. Evil Grandpa. Evil Grandpa. Grandpa, that is evil. Evil is, Grandpa. Evil is evil Grandpa. Grandpa evil. Hisashi. What? With even Inko at a loss for words, Ryuko decided to take it upon herself to continue the conversation. Sweetie, why did you call that Grandpa evil? Because he's a villain. A big mean dragon who hurts Mama and Papa. Izuku immediately tuned back in after that. Dad is a villain in that world. Eri nodded sadly. Papa never liked talking about it, and Mama said people say bad things about Papa because of him. The teen wasn't quite sure how he felt at that moment. There were so many emotions going through him. But for perhaps the first time, he pitied his other self. Izuku knew all too well what it was like growing up being ostracized for things you couldn't control. Bad as it was to be born quirkless. Some people had it worse in some ways. Having a quirk that labeled you a potential villain is one of them. People like that weren't just avoided or ignored. They were treated as criminals in the making. Anything seen as a simple accident by someone else would be interpreted as an intentional act by those with villainous quirks. Izuku knew all too well what it was like to grow up being ostracized for things you couldn't control. Bad as it was to be born quirkless, some had it worse in some ways. While Deku was bullied for being useless, Valiant was likely bullied for being a monster. I guess, no, Izuku Midoriya truly has it easy. Izuku was suddenly brought out of his thoughts by the giggling of his mother. Inko covered her mouth. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light of the situation. It's just picturing your dainty father as a villain. Ha! Izuku smiled dejectedly at her. Do you remember that Christmas back when you were 8 years old? The spider and the way he huddled into the corner, squealing like a little girl. Ha! How could Izuku forget? It was one of the most ridiculous scenes he'd ever witnessed. Gah! Cried Hisashi Midoriya. Honey, it's just a spider. Inko laughed. It's the size of a baseball. He yelled, curling himself tighter into the corner of the room. Izuku just stared, unsure of how to feel. By this point, the boy had more or less accepted his quirklessness, and he was glad that his father was around for a change. But watching the man cry, broken down in tears by a spider, was certainly not what he was expecting today. Take it away already. Please. The father begged. All right. I'm getting it. Inko calmly walked to the spider and picked it up with her bare hands. Surprisingly enough, Izuku's mother was one of those rare individuals who was not remotely afraid of spiders. In fact, she may have even owned a pet spider or two in her youth. Or so the boy was told. A devilish grin appeared on Inko as she walked past Hisashi with the spider in her hands. It was the look of a person with no fear of spiders spotting another who was absolutely terrified of them. An irresistible longing to torment. Hey, sweetheart. Do you want to see how big it is up close? No. Get that thing away from me. Inko just continued to laugh at the man's misery. Izuku couldn't quite explain why. But whenever his father was around, his mother would go way out of her way to tease him. It was so unlike the quiet woman she usually was. But the stranger thing was how his father seemed to take it without real complaint. It was like it was merely a part of their marriage somehow. Izuku concluded that his parents had a very odd relationship. Yeah, I remember. You held the spider up to Dad's face for about 10 seconds, and I think he almost fainted. The son shook his head. He was so pale. Inko giggled. His mother definitely had a point, though. Izuku couldn't imagine his dad as a villain. The man could hardly terrorize a bowl of soggy noodles, much less actual people. Eri tilted her head. So, evil Grandpa isn't evil. Inko shook her head. No, definitely not, dear. Grandpa Hisashi is quite harmless. But now I have to ask, who is Toshi? Eri looked perplexed. Alme. Izuku deadpanned with his mother. Will the strangeness of the other world ever cease? The young hero then put his hands over his face. So All Might's my stepdad now. WTF. What is with that reality? Inko placed a hand on her temple. Hisashi is a villain. And I'm in a relationship with the former #1 hero. I did not expect this. Ryuko looked thoughtfully. And I guess that makes All Might my father-in-law. Well, that's interesting. Eri looked down. I'm sorry. I should stop telling people about my world. Ryuko patted the girl on the back. It's all right. They're just processing everything. It's not your fault. Inko nodded. She's right. It's a lot to take in. Izuku looked emotionally taxed. You can say that again. Eri relaxed and then made a face like she was solving a puzzle. So, Grandpa Toshi isn't Grandpa. And evil Grandpa is good. And also overseas. They all nodded. That is correct, Eri, Ryukyu confirmed. The child placed her hands over her head with a groan. This is so confusing. They all laughed in mirthful sympathy at the girl's declaration. After finally getting control of herself, Inko looked to Ryukyu. I've been meaning to ask Miss Ryukyu. My son says things have been going well for him here, but I wanted to hear from you about how my son has been doing. Ryuko responded by becoming a bit more serious herself. All in all, your son has been very helpful in the short time he's been here. Though, admittedly, it hasn't all been smooth sailing, especially with what happened yesterday. Inko looked confused as Izuku grew quiet and pale. What happened yesterday? Ryuko looked back and forth between the boy and his mother. You didn't tell her, Midoriya? Inko eyed her son suspiciously. Didn't tell me what? Izuku looked like he wanted to pass out and have an out-of-body experience just so he wouldn't have to reply. For lack of that, he poked his fingers together. Oh. You see, I got into a fight with a villain. You what? You promised to tell me these things, Izuku. Inko wailed. But I'm perfectly okay though. I only got some light bruises. I was going to tell you, but other things happened. Inko turned to look at Ryukyu very sternly. Is this true? Yes, he got into a fight, but he didn't require medical attention. He and other interns worked together to take down the villain. Weren't you there? Ryuko sighed, bracing herself. This wasn't the first time she had a conversation with a parent like this. No, I wasn't. I left my most veteran intern in charge of the situation. You left students to fend for themselves. Ryuko stilled herself, gathering her thoughts. I am aware of how this sounds, Mrs. Midoriya. But I assure you, I didn't make the decision lightly. 𝐒𝐫𝐲, the veteran intern, has been with me for a long time, and she is quite capable. She paused for a moment, choosing her words. I assumed, perhaps incorrectly, she was ready for the responsibility of leadership. But to her credit, all the students she was in charge of came back safe, despite what happened. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐵 was trying to get her thoughts in order. She didn't like it, but she understood that heroes had to experience danger as part of their careers. There was no avoiding that as much as that fact pained her. Eri tried to cheer everyone up. Everyone came back okay. That's what matters, right? 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐵 smiled at Eri, then looked at her son. Then what happened exactly? What have you been trying to hide from me? Izuku went positively mute as Ryuko sighed. Do you want to tell her, or should I, Midoriya? Izuku sighed as well. Mom, have you seen any news from Terisu City lately? 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 was jarred slightly by the question. I mean, there was a news report about an enormous blunder by a group of heroes who made this massive crater in the street during a fight. I didn't get their names, though. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 then focused on her son's eyes, noting the regret they held. Oh, Izuku, please tell me that wasn't you. He looked down. I'm kinda the main reason that crater is there. She paled, placing a hand on her chest. We're in massive debt, aren't we? Ryuko chimed in. No, you're not, ma'am. Your son is one of my interns, so it's my responsibility to cover for things like this. The Green Mother was stunned, to say the least. But they said it would cost over 50 million yen to fix, and that's a lowball estimate. We can't let you pay for all that. The Dragoon hero smiled warmly. I appreciate the thought, Mrs. Midoriya. But like I told your son, it's too much to have you pay, and any amount you give wouldn't do much in the long run anyway. The last thing I want is for you to put yourself out on the street for my sake. Ryuko then gestured to herself. Besides, it's my fault it escalated to this point in the first place. I should have been there, to begin with. I hope you forgive my short-sightedness and for placing your son in danger. Tears began to well in 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵's eyes as she bowed. Izuku was. You really are very nice. Thank you. Both Izuku and Ryuko smiled at the grateful mother. But Izuku's reverie was short-lived as his mother gave him the mum look. Izuku, have you apologized to Miss Ryukyu? He nodded vigorously and wordlessly. The mother placed her hand on her hips. Now we will have to see what to do about punishing you. Ryuko giggled a bit. I won't tell you how to raise your son, ma'am. But I have already dealt out punishment for all my interns. What kind of punishment? They're all to be janitors for my agency for the next 2 months without additional pay. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 pondered for a moment. I suppose that will suffice. Izuku, make sure you work hard, mister. You're lucky to have such a nice boss. Not everyone is so fortunate. Izuku nodded with relief. Understood. After that tenuous topic, the discussion became much lighter. The group was now discussing how they would spend their time more enjoyably. Games were had and movies were watched. That wasn't How to Train Your Dragon, much to Ryuko's relief. Soon the sun began to set, drawing the day close to its end. The Midoriyas figured it was about time to make their way home, giving their farewells. I had a wonderful time here, Miss Ryukyu. Hopefully, we can do this again sometime, said 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵. It was a pleasure to have you here. So, hopefully, sometime soon. The girl nodded vigorously. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 smiled back. It was great meeting my granddaughter too, Eri. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 had taken well to Eri calling her grandma, and she was perfectly content to call Eri her granddaughter, which relieved both Ryuko and Izuku. The Green Mother looked back at Ryukyu somewhat expectantly as her voice became a whisper. Can we speak privately for a moment? Ryuko raised her brow with a sense of anxiety, but she complied. Eri, have you shown your father your room yet? One could practically see the light bulb go off in the child's mind. I haven't yet. Let's go, Papa. Whoa, geez. Izuku shouted as he was pulled away. Left alone, Ryuko turned back to Inko. What is it, Mrs. Midoriya? The mother smiled. Please call me Inko. There's no need for someone such as yourself to refer to me so formally. All right, Inko. I just wanted to ask you personally, if you could promise to keep my son safe. Ryuko was taken off guard by the sudden change in the small woman's demeanor, noting how it became more somber and allowed her to continue. I know you will look out for him anyway, but I need to hear you say it. I've nearly lost him so many times now that it almost feels like I'm waiting for him to never return. Tears began to fall from Inko's weary eyes. I know this is pathetic, but I need some reassurance that while he's out here, someone is looking out for him, making sure he'll come back to me. Ryuko placed her hands on the mother's shoulders, a stern look in her eyes showing no sign of any doubt. I swear, I will do everything in my power to keep him safe. I know you have reason to doubt me with what happened yesterday, but anyone that dares to harm him will have to go through me first. I'll make sure of it. I doubt my instincts would have it any other way as it is. Inko let out a breath that even she didn't know she was holding. Thank you. And sorry about this. It's just he's gotten hurt so many times. I know. I think it's more than fair for you to worry, given all that's happened to the boys' class. Does he know you feel this way? I think he does a bit, but I'd rather he didn't know the full extent. Izuku needs to focus on his dream. The mother paused with a pained expression, regret heavy in her gaze. He doesn't need to worry about me on top of that. All right, I'll keep this between us. And don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him. Inko bowed. Thank you again, Miss Ryukyu. Call me Ryuko. The pro cut in with a grin. No, I couldn't. The green lady waved her hands. Please, consider it a request of my own. Very well, Ryuko. The dragoon hero smiled as Izuku and Eri finally came back. There were so many dragons, just dragons. Everywhere. On the walls, hanging from the ceiling. The boy murmured, looking shell-shocked. Eri grinned wildly. I take after my mama. The women snickered at the pair. Yes, you do, sweetie. Yes, you do. Ryuko replied. While Eri might not sleep in her room, that didn't mean she didn't use it at all. The place was stuffed with various dragon paraphernalia, like some fantasy trophy room, and Eri was all too proud to show it off. Izuku walked back next to his mother. So, are we ready to go? She nodded. I believe so. Right, Ryu? The pro smiled and nodded back. Couldn't agree more, Inko. Izuku looked back and forth between the women. What happened? As the mother and son began to leave, a thought occurred to Izuku. Ryukyu. Did the police say what the deal was with Dozer? I haven't gotten all the details yet, but apparently his quirk had a side effect that made him several times heavier than he looked. It might explain why the hole was so deep. I see. Thanks again. I guess I'll see you on Monday. Ryuko nodded back. See you then, Midoriya. We can discuss how we'll deal with the issue with your classmates at that point as well. There's also another matter I'd like to discuss with you later. Izuku couldn't help but feel some anxiety at that last part, especially with the uncomfortable look Ryukyu had. Oh, right, I nearly forgot about that. We'll talk then. With that, Inko and Izuku stepped into the elevator. As they rode down, Izuku couldn't help but worry about his upcoming talk with All Might. Considering what he learned about Valiant and the other All Might, being his stepdad, how am I supposed to talk to him now? Izuku and his mother were now most of the way down in the elevator, discussing what transpired with Ryukyu and Eri, not unlike how sports fans would discuss the aftermath of a big game. I think that went pretty well. You did a good job, Mom. Inko waved her hand. Oh please, I didn't do much. I don't see how I couldn't get along with them now that I met them. You were pretty concerned at first. I'm kinda surprised you didn't talk about the relationship the other me has with Ryukyu over there. Don't get me wrong, Izuku. I was definitely tempted, but I decided I'd better not make your boss too uncomfortable. Sweated beaded on his temple. I'm glad you decided that. Inko then smirked. Of course, I could always bring it up next time. The beads of sweat became thicker on the boy's brow. Please don't. The mother laughed. We'll see. Although, she wouldn't make too bad of an actual stepdaughter. Ryuko's kind, capable, responsible, and obviously doing well for herself. Mom, please. He groaned. I'm just kidding, honey. You're still in high school, for goodness sake. She waved bashfully. The young hero flushed red. Good to know. Ryuko and Eri were sitting on the lounge room couch, watching How to Train Your Dragon. After Ryuko told the child of the movie's existence, there was nothing more Eri wanted than to watch the sequel. As relieved as Ryuko was that she wasn't watching the first installment anymore, she couldn't help but feel that she would be subjected to this movie for days on end instead. It didn't help that she didn't like this movie as much as its predecessor. However, that wasn't the Dragoon hero's biggest concern, which was all too noticeable to the ever-present Tempest. Ryuko, what's bugging you? I thought you'd be happy. We got through today without Inko finding out about the mark. I'm just disappointed with myself. I wanted to talk to Midoriya about the whole fake boyfriend situation. But there was no opportunity to sit him down for a while and talk about it without either Inko or Eri overhearing it. Why would it matter if they overheard? Because it would be embarrassing. The disappointed presence shook her head at her host. The pro sighed quietly. I know it's pathetic, but it's one of the dumbest things I've done and I don't want too many people to know. Well, if you feel that bad about it, you could call him and apologize instead of waiting till Monday. I've been enough of a coward as it is, Tempest. I want to apologize in person without hiding behind a phone. The Sastile huffed. Isn't putting it off till later kinda cowardly anyway? Ryuko nearly lost her composure. My point still stands. Besides, it's not like I have his number anyway. The snarky voice was suddenly struck with immense confusion. You don't? Gee, we don't. Why the hell don't we have it? Isn't that part of the whole work-study deal? Ryuko reclined on the couch as Eri ogled one of the big action scenes. It seemed Tempest's ability to acquire information required effort to sift through Ryuko's mind. It made her field of knowledge spotty at times, to say the least, but it also allowed Ryuko to divert some of her thoughts away from her, like when they went out with Eri yesterday. Ryuko took this opportunity to snark back at her befuddled resident. No, it's not part of the deal. Since you clearly don't know, we have an emergency number to call, but we aren't given a student's personal number for privacy reasons. It's left up to the students to decide whether or not to use their own numbers. Tempest seemed to just let the counter-sass wash over her. Well, that's a shame. But I guess you could still ask for his number. The faux dragon fiddled with its claws. And why would I do that? Tempest paused to think for a moment. Part of her was tempted to say, so you can whisper sweet nothings into his ears every night. But she knew that wouldn't fly, and she wanted Ryuko to get Midoriya's number for reasons. Because he's Eri's other parent, and having his number would make the situation simpler in the long run. Ryuko closed her eyes and thought, partly to avoid looking at one of the scenes she didn't like in the movie. She had to admit that Tempest had a point. There will obviously be several circumstances in the future where having Midoriya's number would make coordinating things relating to Eri much easier. But she couldn't help but think that her mischievous tenant had ulterior motives. Fine, I'll see what I can do about getting his number. But you better not try anything weird. Tempest merely waved her off. How could I try anything? I'm just a voice. You worry too much, Ryuko. Ryuko remained unconvinced. I wonder. After separating from his mother and returning to UA, Izuku found himself outside the teacher's lounge. The boy had long since lost track of all the mental rehearsals he'd done in preparation for this moment. He immensely regretted that he had put this off for so long. There was no getting around the fact that there was so much he had to address with all might. This might even take what was left of the day, though there wasn't much. Izuku took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Who is it? Called a familiar, deep, though raspy voice. It's me, All Might. Well, that can't be right. The voice said with confusion. Izuku had a quizzical look. What do you mean, Dash? I'm All Might. The voice declared triumphantly as multiple groans were heard inside the room. Izuku stared dryly at the door. Can I come in now? There was an awkward cough from the voice. Yes, you may. Izuku entered the lounge, noticing several teachers, such as Midnight, Present Mike, and Vlad King, all pinching their brows in response to the terrible joke they had been subjected to. Tashinori Yagi, also known as All Might, had a sheepish grin. Greetings, young Midoriya. What brings you to the lounge? Izuku was half tempted to ask, did you have kids recently or something? But decided against it. I needed to talk to you about some things. Toshi merely glanced at the young hero's expression and immediately caught on. Oh, I see. Follow me. We'll speak privately in one of the free rooms. Thank you. As the pair walked out, Present Mike called out. Having another jam session with your favorite student, All Might. All Might spoke dismissively. I don't have favorites, Mike. I'm simply doing my job supporting a student who asked for my help. Mike grinned. Yeah, and it's always Midoriya. But whatever, it's none of my business. Vlad interjected. Before you leave, All Might, don't forget what we discussed. The students could gain a lot if we altered the structure of the Hero Studies class. All Might nodded back to Vlad. Don't worry, I won't forget. With that, Izuku and Toshi finally left the lounge, making their way into an empty meeting room. All the while, Izuku was still hyperanalyzing how to best go about this. When they took their seats, Izuku still found himself at a loss for words, allowing All Might to speak first. So, what's been happening, my boy? Well, you see, I'm honestly not sure where to start. There's so much to get through. The teacher grinned. So, a lot has happened then. From what I've heard about Eri and your new work study, I can't say I'm too surprised. Several of the staff at UA were aware of Eri at this point. Nizu had made sure things were strictly need to know. But he figured having certain people aware of the full scope of the situation was necessary considering how volatile Eri's position was, and Ryukyu had agreed. Yeah, I've been busy. Izuku smiled exhaustedly. I guess I'll address that first. You're Eri's grandpa. Toshi stared like a deer in headlights, not fully processing what he had heard. What? Izuku waved his hands in panic. Step-grandpa in the other world. I see. Izuku wasn't sure where he was supposed to go from here. So, he just made it up as he went along. Sue, if she calls you grandpa out of nowhere, you'll know why. She knows you aren't in this world, by the way. We explained that much to her already. With a better grip on the situation, Toshi had a question for the student. How is the other me her grandfather? Oh. He's the other me's stepdad. That All Might dated my mum because, apparently, my dad is a villain over there, and I guess they separated or something. I see why you had trouble speaking to me about this. The world over there is certainly unique. You can say that again. I just learned about this today. It really surprised me. I figured you should know, I guess. Are you jealous? Toshi smirked. What? I'd imagine my fan would be jealous of a version of himself who could call me dad. I'm just curious. The smirk only grew on the retired hero. The boy flustered. A little, I guess. Izuku himself wasn't sure if he was jealous. A younger version of himself would have absolutely adored the idea of All Might being his dad, but now life is a bit more complicated than that. For one, if All Might was his dad, it would make his vast collection of All Might merch a little weird. Just imagining not seeing posters of All Might but seeing ones of his father. Instead felt wrong. His dad's eyes forever watching him as he slept, studied, worked out, and everything else he did in his room. And then there was Izuku's passionate fixation with hunting down rare mites, which in that situation would become rare dads. And just no. Izuku had firmly settled on one idea. If All Might was my dad, there is no way I could keep doing my hobby. Between choosing his hobby and collection, worth probably countless millions of yen by now, and having All Dad, Izuku knew his answer. But I think I'm fine with how things are, All Might. It would be a bit insulting to my dad. Because he deflected. Toshi nodded with a laugh. Fair enough. Has your progress with One for All been going well? That's actually another thing I wanted to talk about. The mentor looked elated. Oh, has there been a new development? Yeah. How should I say this? I spoke to the previous users of One for All. The skeletal mentor's eyes widened as seemingly far as they could go. What? Oh, when did this happen? 2 nights ago in my sleep. Apparently, the core of One for All grew strong enough for me to communicate with them. I guess that also means that's where we all eventually end up. Toshi leaned back in his chair, a look of awe about him. That's incredible, my boy. Did they say anything I should know? That's the other thing. Apparently, I'll be able to use all the quirks they had. The assumption Izuku had that his mentor's eyes couldn't get any wider was proven very incorrect. All of them. He gestured awkwardly. Gradually, I have to get better with One for All to use them. I only have access to one right now, called Black WHP. Still, this is amazing. I never had anything like this with One for All. What does Black WHP do? The man motioned excitedly. It throws out these black tendrils that let me grab things and either pull them to me or restrain them. I'm still getting a handle on it, though. It stings when I use it. Toshi looked at his successor quizzically. I would have assumed you'd be more excited about this. Does it really sting that badly? Or is it something else? Izuku sighed. It does sting a lot, but that's not the real problem. I'm worried about how I'm supposed to explain all this. I just narrowly managed to get away with using Black WHP yesterday. He looked down at his feet, all his worries coming to the forefront. If I keep getting new quirks, it's going to raise a lot of questions. Either people will investigate and figure out something about One for All, or people will think I'm somehow involved with the League. They're the only ones producing things that have multiple quirks. Tashinori took a heavy breath. I see your problem. But that doesn't mean there isn't a solution. We can figure this out, my boy. We've planned around One for All before, we can do it again. The boy responded with a weak nod. You're right. Been through a lot this week. So I've heard. What happened at Terisu was a bit unfortunate. You know about that? Izuku replied with concern. Most of the staff do at this point, including Aizawa. Izuku put a palm to his face. Great. And just when I got his approval too. Toshi gestured. But let's get back to the topic at hand. All we need to do is come up with a convincing enough story to explain away having. Was it 7 quirks? Well, accounting for 9 wielders, 2 were quirkless. So yes, 7. I don't see how we can explain that many away though. What about young Todoroki with his fire and ice? Many people would argue it's like he has 2 quirks even though he technically has 1. Yeah, but even still, that's only 2 different abilities. I have to cover 7. I'm not sure that alone is a convincing argument. The blonde teacher thought harder, cupping his chin. I'm sure there is a way to spin this. Even 1 quirk can be capable of doing many different things. Take young Yaoyorozu, for example. Her quirk can be used to create just about anything. Izuku paused for a moment, inspiration dawning in his eyes. Wait, that's it? I can say that I figured out that my quirk transforms energy into power and becomes various abilities that seem like different quirks. Just like Yaoyorozu's quirk converts lipids into different materials. He continued to think, going into his classic mumble tangent. And it's probably not too far from the truth about how it works anyway. If the core of One for All is like a battery, then the extra quirks that become part of it could be like attachments on a machine that uses that battery as a power source. The mentor had a big grin. See, I knew you'd figure it out. Now the only thing you need to worry about is your classmates complaining about how overpowered your quirk is. The boy slumped slightly, breaking from his tangent. Why did you have to point this out? The retired hero only continued to smile mockingly. Trust me, my boy, you get used to those complaints after a while. He then raised a finger intuitively. And think this way. Now we don't need to worry so much about people drawing comparisons between us. As far as outsiders looking in will be concerned, our quirks are now completely different. Izuku cupped his chin, nodding in thought. I guess that is a benefit. People won't think to trace my quirk back to you anymore. Unless they think you're my dad, and the difference between our quirks is because of my mum. Toshi smiled awkwardly. I don't think that'll be much of a concern. If anyone looks into your mother, They'll quickly tell from her quirk that it doesn't make sense. I suppose so. There was now a lull in the conversation. Toshi decided to take this opportunity to ask a question of his own. A look of hope in his eyes. If you could sate my curiosity, young Midoriya, when you met the previous users, did you speak with a dark-haired woman? Izuku scratched his head with some apprehension. I didn't. I could only speak to two, and they were both men. One was the possessor of black WHP, and the other was the first user. Izuku sighed, having some idea of what his mentor was after. I could only speak to one at a time. The core of One for All isn't strong enough to speak with multiples at once yet. Whenever the others tried to talk, it was all distorted. But I think I saw her. There was a brief look of disappointment on the old hero. I see. Well, it's good that you can speak to them. I'm sure they will have lots of advice for you. He forced a smile. Izuku nodded knowingly, feeling some guilt. I don't doubt it, All Might. The lull returned with a vengeance as Izuku debated whether to continue with what he wanted to ask next. The mentor noticed the disquiet in the boy's expression. Was there something more, my boy? Izuku felt pressure settle in his gut. He didn't know why this worried him so much. It's not like All Might would immediately take One for All away. Although it didn't help that the visage of Judge Might was plastered over his teacher at that moment. Stupid over-imagination. Izuku inhaled sharply. Did you really pick me because I was quirkless? All Might's eyes widened. What do you mean? Where did this come from? Izuku looked away from All Might, towards the window looking outside. Noting how late it was getting. My other self, Valiant. I think he has One for All. If the way Eri described his quirk is anything to go by, I can't see any other reason why a dragon quirk would glow green just like me. And that made you doubt my reasons. The old hero sighed, a complex set of emotions crossing his expression as he seemingly tried to put them all in order. You sure weren't kidding when you said you had a lot to say. Izuku turned back to All Might. I'm sorry, I know I've already questioned you a lot, but I need to know. Toshi leaned forward, clasping his hands together in front of himself. Let me say this first, young Midoriya. Your quirklessness was only part of why I chose you. It wasn't even the main reason. He then placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder with a reassuring smile. Like I've said before, above all else, what I saw in you made me choose you as my successor. That spirit that makes you who you are. The boy looked down, dejected. You mean a stupid kid who nearly gets himself killed without being able to save anybody? Toshi huffed a bitter laugh. I won't argue the foolishness of what you did in that alley on the day we met, but you're wrong. You did save someone. Izuku looked back at the teacher, confused by the man's words. Oh, I didn't save Bakugo. You did that. And it's not like anyone else needed saving except me. Toshi looked down briefly, one hand still on Izuku's shoulder, using his other to comb back his hair. He then looked back at his successor. You saved me. I did. Remember what I said about how I was after I separated from Night Eye? Izuku furrowed his brow. You had given up and were basically waiting to die. Exactly. And do you know what first inspired me to think otherwise? He then pointed at Izuku's chest and buffed up into his muscle form. You did. When you rushed in to save Bakugo that day, it reminded me why I first set out to become the hero I was. He poked gently at the boy for emphasis. It is because of you that I can honestly say, I am here. Perhaps it makes me rather biased, but I wanted my hero to continue the legacy of One for All. Izuku was nigh speechless. Words were barely forming in his mouth. Really? Toshi gave a classic All Might smile. It's not truly about whether you had a quirk or not. That, to me, is not what makes you extraordinary, my boy. And that is likely why this Valiant was also chosen. He then motioned with his arms, spreading them out around himself. From what I can see, regardless of the world, the time, or otherwise, you are and always have been worthy of One for All. Izuku could feel the tears welling up. He tried to fight them, to think of something to ask before the dam broke. Thank you. But why didn't you tell me about that before? Toshi then poofed into his small form, combing his hair again with a bashful look. Because it's a little embarrassing to say out loud. I'm sorry that I held this back for so long, but when we first met, it was all just so heavily rooted in my past, and I didn't want all that dragging you down. Izuku shook his hands and head frantically. Oh no, it's okay. I should be apologizing for forcing that out of you. All Might then gave a look matched with a sobering tone. But now I have something I must ask you, young Midoriya. Oh sure, what? As you said, this isn't the first time you've had doubts. I'm not saying you're not allowed to, but it concerns me how often we've had a conversation like this. All Might motioned to the room, but Izuku could tell he was trying to indicate far more than just that. After everything you've accomplished, after reaching UA and making so much progress with One for All, do you still think you don't belong here? Izuku felt uncomfortable, like he was betraying All Might somehow. But he answered honestly. I guess I do a little. It's hard for me to accept all this. You haven't told me much, but I know you must have had a difficult upbringing. That's how it often is for the quirkless. Is that perhaps why? Izuku sighed. Truth be told, he often avoided the subject of his past as much as he could. The one allowance he made is the story of his hero name. But even then, he tried to keep it brief and often deflected further questioning. He wasn't sure if it was due to shame, fear of judgment, or some twisted form of his continued dedication to protecting Bakugo. But he never liked talking about the past or his more personal problems that weren't somehow related to One for All. Maybe he couldn't bring himself to trust people, to actually be open about himself. At that moment, Izuku recalled the one odd exception to this. His heart-to-heart with Ryukyu on their patrol. Izuku's mind went over the event, how it helped him connect with her, see sides of her he wouldn't have, and be able to help her with a problem he wouldn't have learned about otherwise. He decided against himself that it was time to be open once more. I guess. You were the only one who believed in me back when I didn't have a quirk. A part of me keeps thinking that people only treat me differently now because I have a quirk. That I just got lucky. The concern only deepened in All Might's eyes. I couldn't have been the only one. Surely your mother . No, not even her. The reply was curt, with a pained expression in the boy's eyes. Toshi was at a loss. I see. I'm sorry to hear that. Being an orphan, the mentor could only imagine how that would feel. But he was determined to think of some way to give his successor the confidence he needed. Young Midoriya, I think it's time you found people to confide in about One for All. Izuku's jaw hung suspended like the aspirations of a middle-aged man. You want me to what? What about keeping it secret? Toshi put his hand on his chest. My boy, you need people you can trust. Even I had to rely on others. Detective Tsukachi, Recovery Girl, David Shield, Gran Torino, Nizu, and, of course, Night Eye. A circle of confidants who supported me when I was at my lowest points. Izuku was still skeptical. But what about you? It's not my quirk anymore. And with the way I am now, there is only so much I can do for you. Izuku nodded glumly. Without One for All, All Might couldn't do much in a fight anymore. With the league still at large, he knew his mentor was right. He needed close allies, but telling others about One for All unnerved him. It just seemed like something he would screw up somehow. The retired hero patted the boy's shoulder reassuringly. I know it seems hard, but all you need to do is find people you know you can count on and who can handle the responsibility of keeping One for All a secret. Then you'll see that people believe in you, not for your quirk, but for who you are. Just like I do. Izuku finally let out a smile. Even without One for All, his mentor was still looking out for him. Thank you, All Might. I owe you so much. The feelings are mutual, young Midoriya. Please. I'm trying really hard not to cry right now. The boy's face was scrunched up like an exceptionally dry sultana. The teacher chuckled. Don't strain yourself. I'll be happy so long as the seats don't get soiled. The janitors might get the wrong idea. Izuku started to laugh and lost control of his tear ducts, leading him to release tears of relief and merriment. Oh, I feel so much better already. All that stress seems so stupid now. Toshi sobered a little from the small celebration. That's good to hear. But if I could be bold, It would be good for you to make up with your mother. Izuku was taken aback. I kinda already have, though. My mom's doing what she can to support me. She even made my first hero suit. But whatever happens still bothers you, doesn't it? Perhaps it's not my place to say all this, but you haven't actually spoken with her about it, have you? Well, no. I won't force you, my boy. But trust me when I say this, your relationship with your mother isn't something you should squander. Toshi breathed, forlorn in his gaze. Izuku hesitated slightly. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. The conversation ended there, and Izuku's prediction was on point. It was now getting quite dark outside. Izuku got up from his seat and offered a farewell to his teacher. Thank you again, 𝐒𝐻𝐽𝐸. I'm sorry for taking up so much of your time. Toshi waved dismissively. It's no problem. What kind of mentor would I be if I didn't make time for this? Izuku stood up and made his way to the door, turning back to look at his teacher, who was still seated. Aren't you coming, 𝐒𝐻𝐽𝐸? I'll be out in a bit. Don't worry about me. Izuku gave a slightly concerned nod. Alright, take care. You too. Izuku walked out of the room, closing the door behind him, leaving Toshinori alone with his thoughts. He got up and wandered to the window, gazing across the campus. Perhaps when I become part of the core of One for All, I'll be able to finally thank you for all you've done for me, Nana. As if to destroy the pleasant, quiet atmosphere, the door to the room suddenly burst open, as if giving way to the Kool-Aid Man Bim All Might. Izuku shrieked. Toshi almost coughed up all the BLD in his body. What happened? I nearly forgot to ask you something. Izuku said eagerly. Toshi withheld the urge to pinch the bridge of his nose. All right. What is it? There was excessive jubilation about the successor. Is it true that you slapped Endeavor unconscious? Toshi's irises shrank to the size of pine needles. How did dash? Izuku pointed accusatorily. So it is true. The hero teacher dragged a hand down his face. Yes. But please don't spread it around. I promised Endeavor that nothing would come of it. Where did you even dash? Izuku rushed up to Toshi's face. Do you have a picture? Maybe video footage? Any physical evidence of the moment? Toshi put his hands on Izuku's shoulders to keep him at a distance. No, of course not. I wouldn't really be keeping my promise if I kept evidence of it. Darn. Guess I'll have to try something else. He then turned away from All Might, mumbling to himself. I will find that rare might. Toshi gawked at the back of his student. You scare me when you're like this, my boy. Izuku suddenly became aware of his surroundings once again. Right, thanks anyway, 𝐻𝐽𝐸𝐸. I'll see you around. He offered a quick wave, waltzing out the door, and just as quickly as the boy had reappeared, he was gone again. Toshi sighed to himself, placing a hand on his forehead. I love that boy, but sometimes. Izuku was now making his way back to the dorms, making good headway, when he recognized a familiar figure walking in the direction he was coming from. Finally making your way back, problem child. Aizawa said, sleeping bag in hand. Aizawa-sensei. You know about Terisu, don't you? Izuku said quietly. I don't know whether going from destroying your body to destroying public property can be considered an improvement, but it's certainly different. Izuku balled his hands. I'm sorry for disappointing you again. Aizawa sighed. As I said, Midoriya, you're a pain, but that doesn't mean you don't have potential. I thought you said you were proud of me. Same difference. The point is, keep improving yourself. That's what you really need to focus on. Not what others think of you. The teacher said as he walked by. Those words resonated inside Izuku. Yeah. Improvement. Thanks, sense. Aizawa didn't say anything. Nor did he turn around, only signaling a wave at the boy. Izuku turned and looked at his hands. I still need to develop the core of One for All. And then there's Black WHP. Maybe I can ask someone to help me with it. The young hero continued his trek back to the dorms, going over all the new plans in his mind to further himself to his goal. Now, who should I tell about One for All?